Hello? That Adarsh?
Hi, good morning, Sham. How are you?
Yeah, okay. That's good. I just wanted to connect, that's all. So I'll now mute myself and I
Sure.
think I should stop the video, right? That's the protocol
Yes,
you're
you
using.
can. You can keep doing your work and we'll start at 10:30.
Yeah. Okay.
Hi, Arunavda. Hi, Sanjay sir was here. He went off somewhere. Hi, Adwaita.
Hi.
So we'll start at 10:30. We'll wait for the others to join. Morning, lawyer, sir. Good morning, Sujata ma'am.
Good morning. Is that Adarsh?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, okay. How are you?
I'm good, ma'am. How are you?
Good, good. Thank you.
So we'll wait for the time being. People are joining. So
Yeah.
we'll start at 10:30.
Yeah, I'll just put the video on later.
Sure.
Thank you.
3 કલાકનો એમાં હું
Good morning, lawyer sir.
Morning.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, RK. How are you?
I'm fine, sir.
So we have all the speakers and presenters with us.
Hmm.
Fabrics might join in 10-15 minutes due to time delay, but he will definitely join. So maybe we can start at time because I think a lot of people would want to put across their points today.
Yeah, I think we have a very wide panel today, so we would like to hear from all in detail. Okay, so RK Singh ji.
Yes, sir. Sure, sir. Good morning, everyone. I am RK Singh, Director of Project and Planning, RSDC. On behalf of RSDC, I welcome you all to the focused discussion on the form-based codes adopted by RSDC. I am happy to say that the codes created by RSDC comprises a robust set of frameworks, norms, tools, and guidelines to mainstream form-based development of railway station areas in an integrated and comprehensive manner. As you all know, RSDC is headed by Sri Sanjeev Kumar Lohia as its MD and CEO. Mr. Lohia is an RSC officer with vast experience in the transport and urban development sectors. He was the director in various metro rail corporations in India, and at MOUD, he was instrumental for transforming the perception of urban transport in the country, from creating technical units to centers of excellence to developing various toolkits, guidelines, standardization around the country. At RSDC, Sri Lohia leads the world's largest transit-oriented development and PPP program. I would now invite Sri Sanjeev Kumar Lohia, the MD and CEO of RSDC, to welcome all participants and initiate this focused group discussion. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, RK.
Namaskaram.
A very warm welcome to all the panelists. Today is the last, I would say, formal consultation on the codes for redevelopment. And we wanted to have feedback across the board, be it in India or globally. So I'm very happy that Mr. Shyam Pandekar from Netherlands has been able to join us. Dr. Sujata Gowda from Hong Kong.
Namaskaram.
I think this is a second interaction with you, Sujata ji. You had made one presentation.
Yes, sir.
So
Yes, thank you, sir.
thank you. Welcome, Fabrice Marnon from SNCF Hubson Collection. Mr. Anurag Chofla, President IUDI. So we wanted to have a focused discussion from the urban designer fraternity also. Mr. Arnav Das Gupta, Head of Urban Design, SPA Delhi. Bindra Shastri ji from Bangalore. Sita Raghupati ji from Chennai. Harsh Mistri ji from Mumbai. Vikas Kanojia from Delhi. And all the members of IUDI who have joined us today for this focused discussion. The detailed presentation, etc., would be made by my colleagues subsequently. But very, very briefly, the station redevelopment which we are doing, along with the commercial development in the vicinity, we are aiming at creating a Railopolis. Just like you have Aeropolis or Megapolis, so we are creating a Railopolis, a mini smart city, which would become a role model for the surrounding area development and the city, and also perhaps in the country and abroad. So that is the vision. The development, we are fortunate to have the legal framework through the Railway Act. So the development has to happen under Section 11 of the Railway Act, and that gives us a bit of leeway in implementing certain innovations, improvements, etc., without getting bogged down with the existing acts or the old baggage. So that's, I think some mics mute. There was a echo. So that is the enablement which we are using, but that also puts huge amount of responsibility on us. When we are doing development under the Railway Act, we must have certain set of norms, codes, etc., as to how all this development will happen. The Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs had issued form-based codes as advisory to the states, and that is what we are trying to implement here. How we are dovetailing the local bylaws and the form-based codes, that is what will be clear to you in the presentation. I'm sure you must have codes. So aim is that these codes, after wide consultation with all the stakeholders, we had the first round of consultation workshop inaugural on 19th of April, which was in which the chief guest was CEO Niti Aayog, Secretary Hupa was the guest of honor and Chairman Railway Board, and they wholeheartedly supported the effort being taken up by IRSDC. In fact, the Ministry of Urban Development and Housing, is also wanting IRSDC to partner with them along with NIUA so that we can start capacity building on training program for the urban local bodies and the elected representatives as to how to incorporate the form-based codes in their city development. So I would not take more time. Over to Shri RK Singh. Thank you very much.
RK Singh, sir, you are on mute.
Thank you very much, sir. Today we have many presentations, 2 in-house, then we have some international presentations, then we have a roundtable conference, and then followed by question and answer. So I will request all the speakers to stick to their time so that we can finish it in time. So first of all,
I restricted to my time. I was 1 minute earlier, so I wanted to lead the way. Okay.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir. So to go ahead, first of all, I would like to introduce Shri Vivek Bhushan Sood, Chief General Manager, Projects and Planning at RSDC, who is an RSC of 1994 batch and has worked in various positions in track and bridge management for Indian Railways. He is heading the projects and planning vertical here and is associated with planning of 63 stations and has also used his skills of bridge engineering in executing complex projects of station redevelopment at Habibganj and Gandhinagar. I would now invite Mr. Sood to present about the station development process adopted by RSDC. Over to you, Mr. Sood.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for the introduction. And good morning to all respected MD, sir, and all panelists and people who are attending this this focus discussion. So I would make a small presentation, and normally I have to explain the urban design and the kind of principles we are using at our station. So today, since we have the urban designers in attendance, I think my task will be easier, and I'll try to not elaborate too much about the urban connect aspects, because that will in any case be discussed, and explain some other aspects of what we are trying to do. So I'll just share my screen and start. Okay, so I hope my screen is visible.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
So what we are aiming at is transformation of railway stations. So transformation in multiple ways. We are trying to address the fundamental issues which are there, which the current planning of railway stations is facing. So we are just trying to address the same thing at the fundamental level. So the word that we are using, the approach is transformation. Approach is not an incremental approach, but a transformative approach. And our vision and mission, so it talks about sustainability, it talks about use of technology, it talks about many things. And the task that has been given to us is that we have to mobilize the funds from the market itself. So it's very difficult task, and that calls for a lot of innovation, a lot of listening to the people who are planning the cities, those who are planning the who are the developers, those who are going to invest in the station. So as to understand those viewpoints and incorporate all of that in our planning. And so this is one of the overarching philosophy, that a station is a very, very important part of a city. In fact, the station, if it comes first, and it's a nucleus around which the city grows, or a magnet through which the city will gravitate. A station is something very important and integral part of the city, and something which actually serves the city, and of course gets served in turn, but it serves the city very well. And people are very closely identified by the people of the city identify the stations with the cities, or vice versa. So that is very close bonding is there, and that is what we are trying to do in our station redevelopment. So a bit about IRSDC. So IRSDC is a joint venture of Rail Land Development Authority, IRCON and RIGHTS. So 50, 26, 24, and we are around 9.5 years old company. Currently, we are the nodal agency for station development program as per the approval of Union Cabinet, and also the main project development agency. We have the powers to approve our plans, layout plans, building plans under Section 11 of the Railway Act 1989. And whatever planning we are doing has to be harmonious with surrounding areas, generally follow national IUDI principles, and we have to consult urban local bodies so that this harmony can be ensured. And whatever development we are doing is covered in the definition of a railway, and it is under Section 11 of the Railway Act. There is no need for a separate change in land use across India. It's not required. We have also been given powers as a zonal railway to approve the plans for the station, for the operational infrastructure at the station. So that those powers are also available with us. And we have already started working as a planning body. And this screenshot is of a portal that we have created in Delhi for interfacing with other agencies. And once the Delhi Fire Service Urban Arts Commission, so where they give the approval, and then they give their no objection, and then final approval is being issued by IRSDC. We have approved plans for various states, so Madhya Pradesh, Delhi, Chandigarh, Gujarat, Maharashtra, and also for the first time in the history of Indian Railways, we have issued the occupation certificate for our Gandhinagar project. One important aspect is that Ministry of Environment and Forest has clarified that station development along with commercial development, they are also railway, basically in the same definition of railway, and they are exempt from prior environment clearance. So what they have said is that we have to get a environment management plan approved. So that is what that is again a simplification. But the net thing is that we are now the single point planning and approving agency for the station projects. Now, our focus of redevelopment is on passenger and the city. So a framework of 7 Cs has been made. How we want to go about doing this. So we are doing the design in such a manner that it is congestion free. The station road, the area around station should be congestion free. Station premises themselves should be congestion free. They should be convenient. Conservation of natural built environment, of the heritage, cleanliness, communication, so that people understand the next step to be taken, convergence of modes, and creating a city center. So city center character of railway station. So the stations already at the center of the city, but they don't really at all the places they don't have the character of a city center. So we're just trying to put in the this character so that the stations perform multiple functions and not just the transport function. So what we are trying to do is to organize the external, the entry to the station, and internally we want to change the scenario where the people are waiting on the platform. Rather, they should wait at concourses at the waiting areas which are removed from the platform, and then people are comfortable before the train comes, and then they board the train and go. So this we're just trying to change this kind of scenario. So the strategies that we are using is that this station is divided into 2 parts. One is this green part. So in the green part, all the people who have to take the train, they are there. This central portion, this is the concourse, and all the pink and red parts are the portions where the people who have come by train and they're coming out of the railway station, they are into these red parts or pink parts. So what that does is simplifies the flows inside the station, and externally we can have now simple drop off going this side, pickups going this side, and that reduces the congestion, because now the same areas, because of less chaos, same areas can give us more capacity. So this is the idea of that congestion free, and in this case there is a metro. So we have given this aerial skywalk directly integrating the metro concourse and railway concourse, both directions. People don't need to change the levels; they can directly go from station to metro and metro to station. So this is one important aspect. The other is this concourse. So concourse is a large area, and what happens in the concourse is whether you come from this side or you come from that side, either case you reach this portion only. So what that does is that all the facilities which are available here can be used by everybody. So we can see that we have a large number of seats here. These passages are there. These are the gates where people can get down. And then we can have our urinals, the water, some retail, some other facilities, all can be provided on this floor. So this becomes a comfortable place, and this is the image basically of the railway station which people carry, because all others are just transit. This is where people sit if they have time. If they don't have time, they just rush through this part and go. And one more element that we are trying to put in is this kind of through roof, so that the people are having this comfort. No direct sunlight doesn't enter, the water does not enter, and also large volume of air is trapped. So the thermal comfort is better than normal. So India being a dry and a hot country most of the time, 7-8 months a year. So and of course it can get cold also, but the heat is more of a problem. Cold people can take care of with their clothing, etc. Heat is a big problem. So this helps in countering that, and also it helps in visually connecting all the elements. So this platform, this concourse, all these areas are actually connected together, and the station comes as a unified whole. So we're just trying to put in some elements so that the design is good, people, and even a person transiting will appreciate that, okay, this is the kind of work done. In this case, this was a heritage station, so the work done here is talking about our thoughtfulness to the aesthetics, to the way the station is presented to the people. Okay, so a very common question. I don't cover this part. This is Urban Connect, so this all of you know. One concern that almost everybody has is that stations currently are congested. So we are doing more real estate and more development in that area. Will that not lead to more congestion? So we are actually trying to tell everybody that it is not these are not two competing claims. These are not two things which are actually causing problem to each other. If we do a good planning, then the station complements the real estate because a lot of footfall is there, which the real estate can utilize. And the real estate brings in lots of uses which the passengers can utilize. So ultimately, these commercial functions, they should add to the passenger experience. But what that requires is that it should one thought process which goes into all the development, and we come up with a comprehensive plan with a thought how exactly we want to run this whole premises. And then we never lose sight of that it is a station, but then the real estate also flourishes. It is not like an afterthought or an appendage which creates problems or which creates its issues. So this is our approach, which we hope will be able to do justice to all the competing claims which are there on the land in the station area. Our planning process, this is the flow chart of the planning process. So when we start, we collect the data from railway to understand how railway is going to evolve over the next 30, 40, 50 years. Then we see the city. What is the planning of the city as per the master plan bylaws? What the city is trying to do in this area? Then these two things, plus we try to understand the site. We do the surveys of the site, survey of the passenger, survey of the traffic. So how exactly people are using these premises and all other physical features. So once we have got this understanding of railway, understanding of the city, understanding of our own understanding of the site, then we do the design. So now we know that this is how the railway is going to grow. This is what the city is going to do. So how the station elements should be designed, what are the capacity requirement of the staircases, of the different elements, actually everything, waiting spaces, all the elements. Similarly for traffic, how much drop-offs will be required, how much waiting area required for pickups, how much parking is required. So all of that is designed. So the facilities, fire safety, or different aspects of the station. And once we have this basic data ready, then we come up with various options for developing the master plan. These are then discussed and consulted with the zonal railway as well as the local bodies. And then we after the consultation process is over, the plan is approved and it gets rolled out. So we understand that doing whatever we are trying to do is a win-win paradigm. So the stations are congested, stations are underutilized. If you want to utilize them properly, and this prime asset which is there in the heart of the city, we want it to be a nucleus for development in the surrounding area also. And all this development is on TOD principle, so that the burden on transport infrastructure is reduced. So this is the fundamental part. So we want the station areas with real estate and all should be a welcoming area. It should be a safe area. We should have active streets, eyes on the street, flexible mix of uses. And we want to promote and prioritize pedestrians and non-motorized transport. So these are the requirements, and these are because it's a station area, all the more important. It's a public place. And again, this is the normal area where the boundary walls are cordoned off the properties, and we have this street where people will feel slight unsafe for people in the low light times or when the number of people moving is less. So instead of this, so eyes on the street. So people here are aware of this. So this is this connect between the property, which is one. And because of this, because of these requirements, we had with these codes so that the station area develops at the unique requirements of the station. So there are 6 codes. So one is the handbook for how the station should be planned, how the national TOD policy component should be operationalized in this area. Then form-based codes, so basically which conveys our vision, whatever we have done in the station or in the whole area. So that is get translated into this requirement as a form-based code. Then these are the codes for design, for control of the development in the individual buildings, and green building and heritage, very, very important. So these 2 codes are for green building and heritage assets. So these codes are under consultation, as MD sir was saying. So launched on 19th of April. So we had a very big gathering on that date. More than 1,000 people were there. And then consultations we have already had with the town planners, with the architects, green building consultants, heritage consultants, and today we are doing consultation with the urban designers also. A couple of projects that we have done, and where some of the vision, some of the elements of visions are already visible. So one is this Habibganj. This is in Bhopal, central India. So here we have this existing station is there, and we have conceptualized this new station. And this new station is surrounded by now these commercial developments all around. This is the station. First station handed over to private developer in March 2017. The station is being run by the developer since then. And this is the current photograph. So we can see that the new station is almost ready. This is the existing station. This is the commercial building, which is also come up. More views, new building, existing station, and the commercial development. More glimpses of the project. So this is another commercial building, this commercial building. So now we are having these developments going. And the parking and other things, this work, some work here and some work in the of the furniture and finishing inside the station. That is what is going on. This is the render images of how it should be on the inside, and some of the glimpses of the inside the station. So the station is almost ready for commissioning. And the two subways have been constructed here. These are the exit paths. So this is the entry path for the people to enter the station. People wait in this area. This is a large area, whereas this is actually the exit path. So these are two subways already commissioned long back, and these are being used. And we can see the development. So how the station that we took over in 2017 and today, how the station is looking like. So a lot of development has taken place here, and this is the first redeveloped station in India on the lines that we are describing here. So this is going to be inaugurated, and then we'll take the feedback and then adjust the model based on how the passengers are using it. The other project is a 318-room 5-star hotel which have been constructed above the railway tracks. So this roof is there underneath the railway tracks are running, and this is the entry of the railway station. Whereas the hotel, this 5-star hotel, so entry is through this ramp which is provided on the backside. So we can see that this is a different kind of development, and something which is very much required in our land stressed cities like Mumbai, Bangalore, even Delhi. So this is a very different kind of project, and if we see, so this is the hotel. There is a Mahatma Mandir. It's a 10,000 seater convention center. So this convention center and this hotel work on the in synergy with each other. And this is the central vista of Gandhinagar, which is the capital of Gujarat. And on this end, we have got the Gujarat Raj Bhavan. So because of the central vista, this station, this had to be developed above the railway tracks. But this kind of requirement is required wherever the land is stressed. So in this case, it was a different requirement. So this hotel is also ready, as we can see in the images. Final testing of the different facilities. That is what is going on. And more views, we can see this 99-meter through roof, which covers across all the current and future platforms and tracks. So there it spans right through. And we have got two subways in this case also. And this is the level where the concourse is. So we can have the segregation going here also. And the hotel we can see on the inside. So this is the this hotel. This is the main lobby. These are the dining areas, holiday dining, lounge. So the station, this hotel is also ready and goes into commercial use next month. So both these projects are unique, and this is the kind of development that we are seeing. So we'll discuss the various elements of these projects in subsequent presentations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vivek, for briefly telling about what all is being done in IRSDC, and briefly also telling our two projects which we have recently completed, that is Habibganj and Gandhinagar. Our next speaker is Ms. Paromita Roy. She is an urban design and planning expert in IRSDC, presently on deputation from DDA. Paromita Roy is an architect, urban designer with over 20 years of experience leading and implementing large-scale projects across the globe, integrating urban planning and with infrastructure and resource management, sustainable mobility, built form design, and economic viability at various scales, embodying a multidisciplinary approach to urban design. She is a specialist and expert in transit-oriented development. I would now invite Ms. Roy to present the form-based approach adopted by RSDC while making these codes. Over to you, Ms. Romi.
Thank you, sir. I'm just going to share my screen and I'll make it very brief and quick. Is my full screen visible, sir?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, sir. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to this consultation session. So I'll just try to explain what are the basic principles and process we are following for doing this work that we are doing, which Mr. Sood has explained and given a very wonderful overview. Basically, as we know, urban design is the seam between planning and architecture, and it's that missing gap that has been there for many decades. And actually, the form-based actually just fills that gap, and I'll just show you how we are filling that gap in the context of stationary development. So the first and foremost thing is that the local planning laws, the local master plan, the local bylaws. So how are we addressing that? We are addressing that in two levels. One is the overall railway plot, which I will show as we come ahead. And also then at the building level where the local bylaws play, because building construction is localized. And Himachal Pradesh ka building will not be the same as a Kerala building, will not be the same as a Gujarat building. So local bylaws definitely have to be adhered to as far as possible in the building approvals, and the local master plan, so that it is conducive to the environment. The norms have to be applied at the overall railway plot level. So that is the first level of synergy that we're looking at. The aspects where we are adding on to, I would not say deviating, we are not deviating from master plan or bylaws anywhere, but we are adding the layers that should come in, the missing layers. And these layers are more or less derived from the National Transit-Oriented Development Policy, which lays out around 6 very clear principles which need to be done at station areas as part of TODs. So one of them is, of course, flexibility of use, because that gives more open and makes it more market friendly, and also gives developers it reduces their sense of risk, because what is in demand, say in 2019, the market has changed in just 2 years. Like the offices are just closing down, and the demand is for affordable housing, and the demand is for various other kind of users. The demand is for hospitals and healthcare. And in fact, in one of our projects, the one in Habibganj, what we had shown as a commercial plot on the other side, the developer wanted to make a hospital. So this is a very key aspect of urban development, which we have included as part of our planning process and form-based codes. Then creation of high quality public spaces, because railway stations, as we know, are active. These are probably the only places which are active round the clock in all the cities. And yet those spaces are generally given to cars. So we are attempting in our projects to take away some space from the cars and give it to high quality public spaces where these the passengers and also the people of the city can congregate or disperse or enjoy themselves, or even when they're not. Rajat Kanji,
participants are requested to mute their mics, please.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Number 4, priority of planning on sustainable modes of transport and walking. This is, of course, that is without saying it goes. Integration of road and infrastructure network of the city. Now, when these stations were built around, decades back, most of these stations were built at the outskirts of cities. And now the city has grown around the stations. And often it has been organic growth. Very often it has been unplanned growth. The road network is not really in that capacity. So this is one major aspect that we're having to look at. So not only the road network connectivity to the station, but also overall improvement of network around the station, so that, often you need to segregate the through traffic from the station bound traffic in order to make it more comfortable for people to reach the station and get out of the station. So in this aspect, we interface a lot with the local body, and we work very closely with them and with their master plans to enhance and fasten the process of road infrastructure development around the station. Number 6, infrastructure benchmarks as per URDPFI guidelines, which have been recently notified. Again, this everybody knows. Demand management based parking provision, again, very important. In several of our stations, like I gave the example yesterday of Ambala station, there's a parking lot inside the station, and there is a bus terminal just opposite the station. So bus terminal ka parking happens in the station plot, because the city ka parking rate is around ₹40, and inside the station it's just ₹20. So everybody parks there, and of course railways earns money, but when you start doing development, then one has to see that what is more important and what makes more business sense, and what makes more Jayashree, I think your mic is on. Yeah. It's not just about Jayashree, aapka mic on hai? It's not just about doing public spaces for the sake of public space, but actually creation of public spaces and regulating and taking away a bit of space from just cars parked in front of stations actually adds value to your development, increases the quality of life of passengers, and automatically when people are going to like a place, it's going to have better commercial value. So this all eventually links up to better commercial value and better quality of life for people. They are both interlinked. Then response to heritage, we had a separate session yesterday, very long one, about the heritage aspect. And this is again a very important aspect we're looking at in all our plans. Many of our stations are heritage buildings, old buildings. In some of them which don't have very high heritage value, we are very nicely integrating them into modern buildings. And with the listed heritage buildings, of course, we are restoring them. We have kept very comfortable budgets. We have got heritage consultants who come and do quick audits and also give us budgets, and those budgets have been integrated in our overall business plan and as part of our project RFPs. So heritage and refurbishment of that is also a very serious part of that we are doing. And last but not least, the sustainable development planning process, which is part of the urban design framework. And in fact, IUDI, Arunam, he had come and helped us in putting this together, and Mriganka and a lot of other urban designers have been helping us behind the scenes, and we are very thankful for that. And that has really helped us develop these codes as well. Then we have the plan assessment and approval portal that you may be aware. We have an online portal for doing approvals for not only our own projects, but also like if Northern Railway also has a project happening in Delhi or in North India, so they in Delhi, so then they also apply through this portal. And we process it for DFS and DUSC. All the approvals are processed through our online portal, which has been active for the last 2-3 years. So these are the performers, just a screenshot of that. So I'll not get into these details because I think everybody here knows much more about it. I'll quickly just take you through the steps which I have explained and hand it over to the next speaker. So the norms are applied on the entire railway plot. So you can see the red line. So this is considered as a single railway plot. So things like height restriction, FAR, setbacks, they are applied to this overall railway plot. So that also gives us the advantage of having build-to-edge buildings inside the thing. It is what we call integrated scheme in normal parlance, in planning and design parlance. Of course, it's integrated with the land use. So I'll skip that. Now, how does the bridging happen? So when we have applied, like I mentioned, let me just go back to this plan. So this is where the planning norms are applied at the entire layout plan scale. So here the norms like road network, the TOD principles of having fine road networks, having enough pedestrian crossings across the station. Because one very important thing is that these stations, as I mentioned earlier, they were at the outskirts of cities. So city used to be on one side. But now, since the city has grown on the other side, also they're often they are fracturing the the fabric of the city. So putting in these crossings and subways or FOBs is very important. So even though a lot of these FOBs we are not building, but we are putting them in the master plan so that the local body is generally very interested in having these crossings. So when they come in with the funds, they can build them, and this will reconnect the both sides of the city. So it's a very important part that we're looking at. Then of course we come to the form-based codes. These are the 3 levels. Yes, my move this. So the three levels. So the one you see at the top is the overall, the layout plan where the building volumes have been illustrated in a sample format. But actually, what goes into the tender is this. I hope my mouse is visible. So where we have said defining buildable volumes, this is the volume that is actually available as per the local norms. So the height restriction and the subplot boundary. And we call it subplot because the overall boundary is the plot. So the internal one, which we are actually putting as part of the RFP, is the subplot. And of course, the overall layout also is part of the RFP package, but that is more like what we call mandatory works. These are roads and greens and station areas that he has to build, and they will be maintained on behalf of railways by the concessionaire. But the subplots which we are talking about on the slides are actually the one where he uses these for monetization. So not only monetization, these also have a huge contribution to the quality of space and the quality of life that's going to be there in these precincts. So the left one is the buildable volume, which we are putting in our RFP. The form-based code is also part of the RFP, and we have put it in what we call a buildable volume card or a property development card. In that, 5 aspects are there, which I will explain further. These two go into the RFP. Now, when the developer comes in, then he can do something like what you see on the rightmost bottom picture, which he will then say that, okay, this is my envelope, but I can build whatever. So this is how it's working. And then, of course, with the building plan, he will come to our OPAS portal for approval. So that's sort of the interface that happens. And the missing gap is where it fills in. So this basically illustrates what I just explained. Which is the three-tier planning, the layout planning at the plot level, the subplot with the property development card or the buildable volume card, which has the form-based code. And the third level, after he comes with the building plans, and he goes for the building design approval through our online portal. So this, I think, I don't need to say this, but we follow the rigorous process of doing surveys, assessments, opportunities and constraints, then come up with the strategies. We generally do around 3 options. And after the options are prepared, we take it to the PSMC meeting. There's a plan approval committee in IRSDC. After that, the committee approves it. Then we send it to the railways and the local body. This is all based on the urban design framework plan that I mentioned earlier, that has various aspects that we look at. And then the final layout plan of the site is prepared. This is like a tutorial in terms of, it's a graphic tutorial that is there in code number 2, which talks about the process of planning. So, very often we would find consultants would come with just identified plots in the railway land, and then just say, "Ki, this is for monetization and this is the station." So that was a big challenge that we had to just put this thought across and get this idea across, that it's not an isolated commercial development and an isolated station development. It is very much seamlessly. If we don't integrate it with the city, it's not going to, neither is it going to sell, nor is it going to serve the people. So this graphic process is there in the code, and detailed codes of these aspects are also there in the various codes that are there for publishing. So step by step, connecting to the context, putting in the road network, which connect to the the surrounding nodes, the multimodal integration with the surrounding nodes like bus, metro, other stuff, often freight also. Then creating the street character where we want our active frontages, identifying those things, creating the nodes where we want the hubs, where the high value portions are, and then where we can create our open spaces, and internal cycling and walking networks, of course, are integrated with our street sections and street designs. And then the station design is simultaneously being done, and we have very detailed toolkits for calculating the sizing of the station design, not only the station end blocks and the concourse, but we also have wonderful toolkits that Sood sir and everybody and Rishabh, our team, they've done this wonderful job in even preparing tools for calculating the parking demand, how much parking of each mode is required. And we follow a pretty scientific and rigorous process in coming up with the numbers, the sizing, the figures for passengers, and that number impacts the design and the sizing of various aspects within the plan. So then the process of basically coming up with this, which is the urban design scheme, and the layout plan for the project. So the final regulating plans, the two levels, the first level, which is the layout plan level, is this, the overarching level. So there are various layers in this. So we have devised these layers which are very simplifying. Otherwise, what happens is that एक ही drawing में बहुत ज़्यादा information होता है. So it's difficult to filter out. So the person who's making the street may not be interested in looking at what's happening in the subplot. So there is one overall layout plan, and then we also have these layers. So the green layout plan actually talks about the green layout and also what norms are going, like how much percentage of soft surface, if any commercial is permitted in the green, how much of soft surface, what are the pathways. Like in this, you can see that we have in the, this came from the urban design framework for the Chandigarh project, for example. So you can see that there's a road network there. I think I'll use the highlighter. Yeah, so there's the road network here. And through the parks, we have given these pathways because here there are railway offices where a lot of people live here. This is a railway colony. वो रोज यहाँ चल के काम पे आते हैं. तो अगर ये गेट हो जाएगा ये पार्क, तो फिर वो चल के नहीं आ पाएंगे. फिर वो ऑटो रिक्शा लेना पड़ेगा उनको, बाइक लेना पड़ेगा, ट्रैफिक इंक्रीज होगा. So a very simple thing of putting these finer road networks and pathways through parks, which are integrated in an overall layout plan, is going to, you know, make his life easier and make our life easier. So that is part of the green area layout plan. Then of course the street layout plan has like the dedication of space for multi-utility zone, the footpath width, the overall junctions, where we think that roundabouts could come so that the traffic calming happens naturally and where we don't need it. Then these layers are for the transportation layers. So there's a separate layer for walking, cycling, cars and public transport like buses. There's a bus terminal location. So these layers are put in the various layout regulating plan at the overall plot level. Then we come to the property development card, which is the subplot level, the smaller level that I talked about. So that subplot level, so I've just shown the Chandigarh example. So you can see that this is what is going in the code or in the RFP, and he can make anything out of it eventually. So, but we have specified that he has to give an arcade which connects to the station walkway and also responds to the activity happening on the main road. So, and this is drawn, of course, from local things in the Chandigarh RFP. So we gave him these samples, like this is Sector 17 arcades, which connects the entire Sector 17 market and all the buildings in a continuous arcade. So that character is already there. So this is part of the form-based rules. Then allowing, we have permitted sharing of green areas. So a school playground and a tot lot or a swimming pool or a tennis court can be shared between, you know, the housing and the schools within the same block. These aspects are looked at. Now, I think if all of you have looked at the property development cards, I'll just hurry up on this because it's a lot of slides. At the subplot level, the parameters that I mentioned that the buildable volume card has are these 5 very important parameters which go into our RFP documents. One, of course, is the volume. This buildable volume defines the amount of development he can do. And there are certain assumptions of ground coverage taken for calculating the optimum amount of built-up area that can go into the plot. And that is also part of the RFP. Here, you can see that in most cases, the subplot plot line is same as the build-to line of the building. Somewhere it is not. Like in some places, we want a gap for some reason. So there, the build-to line may not be at the red line, but in most cases, it is. Then the second condition is the edge condition, which is second parameter of the form-based code is the edge condition. This has mainly 2 parameters, the active frontage and the colonnade. So in hot areas, we want, especially where we are expecting passengers to be coming out of the station and walking through, or general people walking past in heavy numbers. So there we have mandated climatic protection in the form of arcades. This is not always mandated. So where heavy footfall is not there, we just write optional. But where heavy footfall is expected, we write it as a mandatory element. And then same with active frontage, we all know, which is having retail or active, even if it's residential, active frontage doesn't always mean shops. It can even be residential, but you will need to have townhomes and buildings which open up to the main arcade or the main street. So your entry has to be from the active frontage side. So that's the second parameter. The third parameter is bridging over ROWs. This is something that was very common traditionally. I don't know how we forgot all these good things that were there in our traditional developments. So they are sort of all being brought back. So as we know, it has so many benefits. Like in the bottom picture, you can see This is not only connecting two building floor plates, it's also connecting a floor plate or two buildings across the train, train tracks. So this not only creates a wonderful interconnected, easy to move around environment for people working in these areas, like you may be working here, going for a restaurant there, or living in that hotel, and maybe going for you're going for a drink with your friend in the other building. So this sort of creates a wonderful environment for pedestrians and users, and it also creates value for the developer, because once you have smaller blocks, the viability issue comes in, because when you want larger floor plates for commercial or other users like hospitals and other things, they require fairly large floor plates, and with a small block size, achieving the larger floor plates becomes a challenge. So doing and allowing these bridging over allowing this bridging over right away, it helps creating value for the developer also. So this of course is subject to the NOC. I think something happened here. Okay, this happens subject to the NOC. So if the owner of this plot is not he himself, then he has to take NOC, and of course if both the plots are his, then he doesn't need to, and he can bridge over. And this also, it helps everybody. The fourth aspect is the wayfinding feature, which is the clock towers and the wonderful things that we read in college. We've been talking about it for decades. The Kevin Lynch aspect of having the view corridors and sort of seeing the station. जब station पहले बनता था तो दूर से दिखता था. There was a clock tower or a station tower. और आती थी तो उसका आवाज होता है. And people love stations. Like yesterday, somebody in the heritage code said that heritage session said that everybody thought that the actual Charbagh actually looks like Charbagh station and not the other way around, because people see the station more than they actually see some other place in the city. So the stations have an immense amount of mental map value in people's minds. So now with urban development and dense development happening around station areas, it's a very important element that we need to look at to make sure that we're adding new markers and new memories for people of that city. So like stations like Gwalior and Kanpur, where the stations are really buried, Udna, there we are creating marker elements, so that there's not only development, but there's also this element of civic pride that comes in. And these are also part of the form-based codes that are put into the RFPs. And the last but not least is this very, very important aspect of the mandatory pedestrian passage. So this is sort of linked to the idea that I mentioned earlier of the larger blocks. So either it's two blocks connecting with each other, or it could be a larger block which allows a pedestrian passage at multiple levels. So if there is maybe a subway from a metro, so that pedestrian passage could be at the basement level. In this one, the ground level is one, like in Vijwasan, we have ground level passages, because we want people from all sides and all roads to be able to reach the station. So these passages have been given at the ground level. So bus se utar ke log aaram se station tak. And the upper one that you see, this is also an option where you can, the concourse level is at the level where the arrival departure people are coming or going. So people coming out of the trains don't have to come down. वो directly commercial के through mandatory passage होता है, so they can go through the commercial and get out on the street near a bus stop. So it not only reduces your traffic load inside the station, it also creates a more enjoyable experience for the pedestrians and users. And it increases viability for the developer, because now he can put his retail, and like very common in China, Hong Kong, South Asian countries, where the corridor, you can do all your shopping. घर जाने से पहले सारा shopping, grocery shopping, सब कुछ station में ही हो जाता है. You simply catch the bus or auto and go home after that. So it's a win-win for everyone. So 5 aspects are part of the form-based codes that are put in our RFPs. So these are just snapshots from the RFP documents, explanatory shots. So this code is actually part of the RFP, where we have mentioned these, that wherever active frontage, for example, is mandated, you cannot have a boundary wall. You can have a little higher plinth for privacy, and you have to have at least 50% transparencies. So that sort of demonstrated how that is going to be calculated. So these aspects are part of our codes. Common areas also, what kind of walkways and all, which I showed in your Chandigarh thing. Some examples of how the structures are interpreted in this. Street regulation cards I've already explained, but I'll just show you these snapshots of how it works out. So the key thing is integration. So at the layout plan level, all the 3 things that we talked about today, the streets, the MPP, which is the mandatory public passages, and the pathways inside parks. They all have to sort of make sense and they have to interlink with each other. Like often we see in our city, zebra crossing hota or median cut kahin aur hota hai. So that should not happen. So this is the very important part of the layout plan process, which then informs the smaller property development cards that are going into the RFP documents. So just some illustrations of that. I think all of us know these in fair amount of detail. A lot of experts are here. So I'm not going to jump into too much detail, but just to show you how we have codified these very generic, general, but very small sounding, but very important aspects in our property development cards. So just how the view corridor and all, if there's, this is a very important thing because station ka jo heritage stations hai, so we have had to say that ye jo vision cone hai, ye plaza itna hi hoga. And we've written in our document that you cannot even put parking in a way that it blocks the view of the building, if it's a heritage building or it's an important building. Because otherwise आपका 2 meter eye level तक तो गाड़ी खड़ी होती है. Most of the time you can't even see the building. Either it's a boundary wall or it's a parked car, which is blocking your views. So just some codes, samples of codes for the view cones and height controls, etc. that are there. This is Adarsh. Would you like to talk about the heritage part?
Very briefly, these are some of the response to the heritage stations. And you can, Romy, skip. I think we'll not go into the details. We've taken a lot of time. So only on specific stations where we need to get into the details of how the surrounding development responds to the heritage station, we'll get into these kind of details. So the idea is that these codes lay out a palette of parameters, and based on the requirements of the station and the subplot, the technical consultant who's appointed by IRSDC, who's a team of experts, will then go and go into the details and specify these specific norms for each subplot.
Yeah. And the key thing to note is that heritage is part of the urban design process. So, and so is landscape. So that is an important takeaway that I would like to just focus on this. And with that, I will close my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Romi and Mr. Adarsh. It was a very nice presentation. Now we have some experts from having international experience. There is a slight change in the sequence. I will request Mr. Fabrice Menon. Actually, he has requested to give him first chance so that he has some urgent work. I hope other speakers will not mind it and allow him to give presentation. So now I will invite Mr. Fabrice Moran, MD of SNCF Hubs and Connections, and in charge of the international development of stations. SNCF Hubs and Connections develops all the expertise linked to transport hubs, from financing, conception, exploitation to the optimization of the retail and real estate development revenues. As the MD, Mr. Fabrice aims at reinforcing the existing partnerships and accompanying transport hub operators in India to optimize the management of hubs and stations and maximize the commercial potential. Mr. Fabrice is Chevalier of National Order of Merit 2016. Over to you, Mr. Fabrice.
Fine. Thank you very much. And first of all, I want to thank you, all of you. I want to thank you, Mr. Loya, for this invitation. I think this is a very interesting discussion, and I'm very glad to attend this workshop and this conference. And thank you for allowing me to switch with another expert. Because unfortunately, I have to jump just after this meeting on another meeting, and it's very kind of you. It's very early in Paris now, but I'm so glad to be with you, and I don't want to take much of your time. And today, I wish to share with you our experience on the refurbishment of Bordeaux railway station. I don't know if you can see my screen very clearly.
Yes,
it's okay. I'm going to go on. Is it better? Oh.
Yes, it is okay. You can bring it to presentation mode, please.
Okay, great. Thank you. Like this. So this is very briefly, as you say, so SNCF Apps and Connection is a subsidiary of SNCF Group, and I am the managing director of Apps and Connection, and we are very eager to partnership with RSDC regarding, you know, the redevelopment of station, and we especially work and focus on Pune and Bangalore station. As I told you today, I want to discuss and to go through Atlantic TOD project. It's in France, in south of France, as you can see here. Yes, sorry. Oh, yes, here. So here you have Bordeaux, it's in south of France. Here in the middle of France is Paris. Can you see the screen? I'm sorry, because
Yes, yes.
Okay, sorry, thank you. So we decided to refurbish the station for the arrival of the high-speed line in June 2017. And as a matter of fact, it was a refurbishment of the station, but also a redevelopment of the whole area, you know, around the station. Because we consider when we redevelop a station, it's not only the building of the station, but as a matter of fact, we decide to redevelop the whole neighborhood. And you know, it's very important to be in this mindset. And I know that you are also in this mindset. Bordeaux, it's very interesting because thanks to the high-speed line, now you can connect Paris to Bordeaux only with a 2 hours journey by train. So it's very interesting, and you know, especially for business travelers who can go almost in a daily journey from Paris to Bordeaux. And so this project, as I told you, it's a TOD project. A TOD project of the neighborhood, and in the heart of this project, you have the railway station. So first of all, it's a big project of 738 hectares, of which we have 150 hectares dedicated to the station. It's also a huge investment, almost 212 million euro invested in the station, and more than, and I highlight the figures, almost 5.5 billion euro in the neighborhood. And you know, if we were able to invest such amount of money in the neighborhood, it's because, you know, of the driver, it's because of the driver and of the station, because you have this economic driver in the middle of the neighborhood, which is the railway station. We had estimated the increase of the passenger between 2009 and 2020. It's a huge jump, you know, from 11 million passenger per year to 18 million passenger per year. And we have two main means of financing this refurbishment. First of all, it's a public financing, thanks, you know, to local governments, and this public financing, you know, aims to develop, you know, the creation of, for instance, bridges over the rails, the construction of parks, and the work renovation around the station. And I saw it on the previous presentation, how to connect smoothly the station to the neighborhood and how to go in or outside the station. Then we also have private financing because, you know, SNCF is a state-owned company, and sometimes it's very difficult to find equity in our company. So we have to deal with a private investor, and the private financing are concentrated on the creation of car parks and new residence housing, building, hotel on the neighborhood. and those investments enable, an upgrading of the neighborhood. And to be very frank with you, before the refurbishment of the station, it was not a fancy neighborhood. I will even say it was not a very good neighborhood around the station. But thanks of this redevelopment, now it's a very trendy neighborhood in Bordeaux, and all the people, even people who live in Paris now, want to settle in this neighborhood. And we observe an increase of the price, for instance, of the housing in this neighborhood of the station. So, what are the benefits of this renovation? First of all, as I told you, and you can see it on this picture, it's a huge renovation of the neighborhood. We created almost 480,000 square meters of offices, 50,000 square meters of shops, and what is very important, and I want to stress on this figure, when the projects will be achieved, it will create 20,000 jobs. It's incredible. 21,000 jobs in the neighborhood. It's incredible. And we can assess almost 2 billion euro added value, for the station and the company around the station. And if we stress on the turnover in the station, in 2014, it was almost 30 million euro. And nowadays, in 2018, it's almost 42 million euro. So it's a very, very outstanding result. And as Vivek said, it's a kind of win-win paradigm with a partnership between public and private players. Now, I just want to.
Mr. Fabre, just a request. Can you elaborate on the turnover of the station? What all is included in that? Sorry to intervene. Just I wanted.
It's okay. I prefer to have open discussion.
Yeah,
Sorry,
turnover of
what did you
the
say?
station.
Yes.
Yeah. What?
Can you repeat? Yes.
What all is included in turnover of the station? You mean to say only in the station itself, or whatever development has been done in the surrounding area, you have taken that also into account? So I just wanted to briefly know about that.
About the sound was not very good. Sorry. So you were asking about the redevelopment around the station?
For a station, turnover of this. What do you mean by turnover in the station? Turnover in the station, the last point you have said, turnover in the station in 2014 was 29.3 million.
Yes,
And it raised to 42.8 million 2018.
Yes,
so
exactly.
Turnover in the station, I want to know, just explain that, what all is included in the turnover of the station.
Is it all the retail, etc., that you have at the station is included in the turnover, or it is also the ticket sales and all the offices, etc., the revenue from parking? It is all inclusive of all of that, including.
Yes. Oh, yes. If I include the revenue of the car park, do you mean in this turnover?
And the office rentals?
Yes. Yes, you have different source of revenue. You have, first of all, office rentals, as Mr. Loya said. Then you have also the retail revenue in the station, and you have also the fees paid by the train. Because in France, in the economic model, when the trains enter the station, it pays a toll to go in the station. And at this end, this is the total turnover of the station. I don't know if I'm clear.
Clear.
Okay.
To go straight to the point, 50% of the turnover comes from non-fare box revenue, which is retail, housing, and services. And the other 50% comes from the railway operators and the fees or the toll paid by the different railway operator, regional transport, high-speed transport, international transport. It's 50-50. But we try to increase the part of the non-fare box revenue in our turnover, to decrease the part paid by the railway operator. So, I'm sorry, I don't know why the sound is not very good, but it's okay.
Okay. You're sitting far away from us. Yeah, please go ahead.
No, thank you for asking this question, because I think it's much more pleasant to have this discussion instead of having all this slideshow. So I keep on going on my presentation. So I told you that now I wanted to stress on the example of the car park, because it's very important, because as you can see in the picture, this is a car park connected to the station. So this car park, so first of all, it's very convenient for the passenger, because they can park their car in a very nice place, very connected to the station. But as well, thanks to the partnership with the operator, it allows to finance 40% of the global cost of the renovation of the station. 40%. It's very, very important. And we have, for instance, a 40 years long-term lease between SNCF and Vinci, which is a car park operator. And during these 40 years long-term lease, Vinci paid us a rent each year. So we have two benefits. First benefit, it's a first investment at the beginning of the refurbishment, 40 million euro. And then at each year, we also have a small part of the rental of the car park, with, I told you, a smooth connection between the station, the car park, and the station. And we have also implemented new services in the station, such as valet parking, for instance. Okay. So I'm going very briefly. So this is, the project refurbishment step by step. And now I just want to highlight this. The renovation was a success because of the key partnership that we were able to tighten. And so first of all, we create a kind of SPV, Bordeaux Atlantic National Interest Operation, who allows the creation of a business center with an international reputation. And it was very important because this SPV was the place where all the players, all the stakeholders were able to discuss, the project. And because on the one hand you have public actors such as the regional council of Aquitaine, but also the city of Bordeaux. But as well, you also have SNCF Réseau Network, SNCF Garant Connection, etc., etc. And sometimes all these stakeholders does not share the same point of view. So it was very important to have this kind of SPV to deal with all the issue and all the stake. And today, thanks to this, the station is a new gateway of Bordeaux and these regions. And as a conclusion, I just want to give you the main figures and to stress on that things that on the one hand, it was a 95 million euro budget for refurbishing all the station. And as I told you, you have the local governments who put in almost 10 million euros. Then you have the city and the metropolis of Bordeaux. and it was, when you put all these public parts, it's about 20% of the project. Then you have SNCF, is as well 25% of the project, and one very important partner, Vinci France, which is a private investor, and he put 40%, as I told you, 40 million euro, which is 40% of the project. Thank you for your attention. If you have any question, I remain at your disposal. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fabrice. As he will be leaving the presentation or our webinar, so any specific question regarding France, anybody can ask. Any specific question, please?
Hello, I just wanted to ask a question. When you're talking of the residential units, what is the average unit size?
Sorry, I'm sorry. Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
You spoke of having, in TOD 10 to 15,000 residential units. So
Yes.
what is the average unit size? Is it affordable housing? It's luxury? What is the kind of segment in TOD?
Okay, you mean the average size of a TOD unit? That's the
Of
question?
the residential unit.
Of a residential unit. Oh, it's a very good question.
Because there's a lot of discussion on how TOD should service the affordable housing, not just for the luxury. So I want to know how you are doing it there.
You mean the size of the unit around the station when you design a TOD? That's it?
No, the size of the housing, the apartment. Okay, the size of the apartment. The average size of the apartment in your TOD scheme.
I think put it in a chat, in a text might be easier.
Yes. I'm sorry. I have an issue with my. Yes. Oh yes. I mean, it's around between 100. I will say it in square meter. The size of the apartment is average 100 square meter. Average 100 square meter. Because it's for
targeted at the younger population. Yeah?
Yes, because for family with one father, one mother, and 2 children in this region in France, yes, it's around 100 square meters with 2 rooms.
And what is the parking standards? Have you reduced parking there because of this being a TOD project?
And you want the number of the slot of the parking?
Or maybe how much have you reduced the parking from a normal project to in comparison to a TOD project?
I'm so sorry. Do you mind texting me, because the sound is so bad.
I think, Mr. Fabrice, you can leave your email ID.
Maybe can you use a chat if you don't mind?
Or I think chat may be used by the participants.
Yes. Okay.
Okay, I think I will request the participants to mail the questions. It will be replied by, as Mr. Fabrice has to leave early. So thank you very much, Mr. Fabrice. We look forward for cooperation with you in RSDC also. So nice of you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So the time, seeing the time limits available with us now, I will request the Mr. Shyam Khandekar to share his experience regarding Netherlands and India. Mr. Shyam Khandekar is an architect, urban designer and planner with over 40 years of experience in leading large multidisciplinary projects in the Netherlands and India. He is also an educator and deeply involved in design education at universities, where he teaches how complex multidisciplinary regenerative designs are achieved. Mr. Khandekar is also the co-founder and director of the international knowledge platform My Livable Cities, co-authored Designing for Sustainability Through Upcycling 2020 and Affordable Housing Inclusive Cities 2019. So over to you, Mr. Khandekar.
Okay. Thank you. Can you hear me, all of you?
Yes.
Yes, you can. Yes. Okay. Let me thank you for inviting me to give my views on what is happening. I'm not an academician in the sense that I can comment on what you're doing from an academic perspective, but as a professional who has worked in this field for many years and worked with form-based codes, I'll tell you some things from my experience, try to help, give some advice on that. There are a couple of things which I think about before anything are important. Codes to me are, at the end of the day, they're just a means to get to the end. So the codes should not prevent, they should prevent actually from something going wrong, but they should not prevent excellence from happening. And I think that is a really important thing to keep in mind, which means that if you keep in mind that urban design processes take very long, and I'll give you two examples on the basis of which then I'll come back to a couple of points of advice, is this particular project which you're seeing. I've been working on it for 30 years. I started in it on 1988 in Netherlands, this particular project, and I'm still involved in it. And it is about 35 hectares of station development and surrounding in the provincial capital of Den Bosch. So if you have such long periods of development, and particularly redevelopment takes long because you're redeveloping in the middle of the city, codes have to be flexible also in a certain way. So how do you ensure flexibility? That is going to be the way I'm going to look at it. I'll run you first very quickly through the couple of two projects, one in this one and the other one in India, and then come to some conclusions. So this is, you're looking at the station square and then the railway line and this development which is called Palais Couture, which used to be an old industrial site, which has been redeveloped into a mixed use from small to large apartments, offices, some shops, Palace of Justice, etc. in the last 30 years. Can I have the next one, please, Adarsh? So if you look at this particular drawing, some of the old sheds have been kept and reused, but in the middle, you'll see the footprint of this area as it was. And I'm only going to talk about those things which are important for what I'm talking, the issues I'm discussing. So if you look at the footprint on the right side, that is the direction which we followed, which was the urban design vision. Important to notice is that on the periphery, on the eastern and the western periphery, you see blocks. And in the middle, you see some freestanding objects. Those are the red footprints. So just keep that in mind, because I'll come to that about how did we get, which were the form-based codes we tried to use to explain this difference in morphology. So the idea was that there was an edge where were the solid blocks and in the middle freestanding objects. Can I have the next one, please? Others? So here you see an aerial photograph of this whole area as it has developed in the last 30 years. It used to be a rundown industrial area where it was indeed rather unsafe to go also late in the evening. In the middle, you see those metal objects. Those are the freestanding objects. And next to it, there's a body of water. And on this side of that row of metal objects, and on that side are these solid blocks. I'm not going to talk about the other issues, only this, because this is what I'll focus on. Okay, can I have the next one, please? Adarsh? Yeah. Now, the important thing is that after there was an idea of a layout plan, what you, in your terminology, have termed as the layout regulating plan. Before we went to the subplots, we did very detailed study of the public spaces and the landscape. So this is something I really want to emphasize. I think that one of the advice which I would like to give based on what I have done is that the public space is the most important thing, and for pedestrians, public space for pedestrians, not for cars. So these large ramps going up to a 5-star hotel up there, that's fine, but what is happening for pedestrians under it, that is important, really. So to my point of view is that the public space needs to be detailed. So there has to be a step after the layout plan before you go to the subplots to design in detail where you have all the sections worked out including the levels, and that is very important, particularly in railway areas. Levels are very important. Not only is the terrain flat, never totally flat, but because you want to have all sorts of crossings, you need different levels of movement. And I know you're using it, but it has to be done, detailed out more properly. And from that, can I have the next slide, please? And from that, then you go to the subplots. Now, these are some of the form-based codes which we used. And I want to show these because these are more than form-based codes in a particular way. While this was not a heritage area, in spite of that, we did use issues such as materials and colors. We tried to include them in the codes which we created, because we thought that that would give that area an identity. And just now concentrating on those blocks on the edges, which you see here on the left side, on the right side of this right drawing, they're all colored this brownish earth colored. And in the middle, you see these freestanding blocks, they're colored white. And in the form-based codes, what we said was that while these blocks on the edges should look solid and should feel solid on the ground, the objects which are freestanding should, and please remember this word, should look like ballerinas dancing on a floor. So you're trying to add to the form-based code certain emotions. It's not only form. And the result has been, can I have the next slide? Sure, please. So this is now the central space, which is this large body of water. There's parking garage under it, by the way. This is 40 centimeters deep, the water. It is used as a solar collector. And these are these freestanding objects which are dancing as ballerinas. Now, because we incorporated that and in the form-based codes gave flexibility and then held a small competition among 3 architects, we got this design. We wouldn't have got this design by making a form-based course which was very strict. That's what I'm trying to explain. The other thing is, can I have the next drawing, please? We introduced level differences on the site, which was otherwise a flat site, and I'll tell you how we did it and why we did it. And that led to a situation like this. So this is at the end of that long water body, which is the solar collector, that the water comes down and it goes down beyond this bridge, under the bridge, it goes down further. And the reason why we did this is right at the heart of the plan also. Can I have the next slide, please? Now this drawing section is very important. So if you look at this drawing and there's a red dotted line going horizontally across, that was the original ground level. Now we had a couple of issues which we wanted to solve. We wanted to put the parking under the buildings without making them basement, because the water table level, which is shown with a blue line, was very close to the ground level. We also had a lot of rubble from the old buildings, which was not contaminated, which we could reuse on the site. So we reused it on the site to raise the central part of the site and then put parking under it. So at 1.30 m became our new level of the site. Under it, we put the parking so that it did not hit the water table. So it was relatively cheap. And the third advantage was that people who were standing in the central area, they could look over the peripheral roads across to other parts of the city. Now, this operation could, in this particular section, if you see the yellow areas are what you would call subplots. The form-based codes for the subplots were evolved based on first a study of the landscape and the public areas in detail. That's what I'm trying to say. So if you do not do this, it is very difficult to get the maximum out of a site, optimal out of the site, if the public places come later and the buildings have been done first. So can I have the next one, please? Now I'll show you a similar thing. The section is very important. Now, all this, by the way, this book is I have recently written this book. This is in 2019, 20 it was published, and it is available at My Label City. There are a few limited copies still in India available of this book. It's a Dutch and English book. So you can see. The other project where public space and the section and why the subplots should only get their form-based codes after the public space has been designed properly, the vision has been created, is this. This is a project which I have done in India. I've been involved in it for more than 10 years. This is a Nirlawn Knowledge Park. Important thing here is just to look at the central space. And if you look at the central space, you'll see some old trees. And what you see on the right side is you see a sloping ground going up and a yellow path out there. It's a broad pedestrian boulevard, which is actually a fire tender lane, but it's designed in such a way that it looks like a pedestrian path. And can I have the next drawing, please? And this particular central area is part of an L-shaped central space in the middle on which on both sides are buildings. And we'll run now very quickly through a couple of photographs to give you an atmosphere. Adarsh, just. So here you see this level difference. Again, the section and the public space guiding the form-based codes. That is the important thing. Can I have the next one, please? Adarsh? This is another one. Here you see the sloping ground going up and steps. And there are two other slides of the same. We'll just go quickly through it. Yeah, this is some festival happening there yesterday. Next one. Those steps being used to sit and use. And now the section again. So again here, the important thing was that while we had done the basic, what you would call in your terms, layout regulating plan, at that moment, before going to the buildings, we first concentrated on the public space. At the same time, we were trying to figure out what we could do to make it, to reduce costs. So one of the problems here was that the rock was very close to the ground. So we raised the parking level above ground, which you see here on the left side, and then used the central park area, which is green, to climb up to that area which became the fire tender lane, but actually works as a park. Now, this particular section has added to the unique identity of the place. It has reduced the cost of development. And at the same time, it has created actually a real estate value, which is phenomenal, because this project, which is now about 4 years back, it was bought by GIC for $300 million. It was an old industrial site. What I'm trying to say is designing public space first drives up the prices. It creates better design. And that is the only way to do it. Don't leave it till the end, because a building has value because it faces a nice public space, besides what it can do on its plot. Can I have the next slide, please? So I have just now 4 simple points. First is that after you have done the layout regulatory plan, or that term which you use, please spend some time first doing an urban design vision, landscape vision exercise. I consider landscape and urban design as one, and not landscape as a makeup exercise. It has to be part of this thing. Don't just leave it to invert levels, etc., and an engineering issue. You can solve a lot of engineering issues, like I showed you in the sections, by choosing clever sections and making it part of urban design and landscape. That's one. Second thing is, point 2 is make the urban design guideline, where possible, also performance-based. It will be more flexible. So at certain places, you can say, okay, this is the height I want to give. This is the code, form-based code. But you may go away from it or change it slightly if the goal which I want to achieve it can be achieved, which is amount of sun coming in, or the windfall being reduced, or the sound level being achieved, etc. I'll go into this detail if there are any questions on it, but that will make the form-based codes more flexible. And in the long term, that's what you need, because that's the only way you can respond to certain market things. The third thing is, include in the form-based codes other softer criteria, which could be, like I showed those buildings to you in Palais Cotier. These were only possible because next to having deciding the heights of the buildings, we said we want the character of the building to be like very freestanding objects, very light, like ballerinas dancing on the stage. So we didn't give exact forms, but we gave that criteria. It's a soft criteria, but gave identity. You can also use materials and colors to give identity, and please use it in form-based codes. And finally, if you give flexibility, you have to make sure that somebody with authority is there, either a single person or 2 people, who can guide it through the process. You may be surprised to hear, but I have been for 30 years. I've not only done the master plan for this particular project, but I'm guiding it all through. And the same applies at Nirlon, that is going on for now 12 years. So I have many projects of urban design where you are involved as a steward, design steward, a supervisor, or whatever you call it, gives one or two people the mandate to guide it so that they can decide that the spirit of design is kept and not the letter of the contractual obligation only. Now, thank you.
A question for Mr. Khandekar, if possible.
Thank you very much, Mr. Khandekar. I think please put your questions in the chat box. We'll take questions once the presentation is over. You
Okay.
please write in the chat box that to whom you are addressing your question. So thank you very much, Mr. Khandekar. We'll come back to you with the question after one more presentation is over. Next presentation is by Ms. Sujata Govada on Hong Kong experience. Ms. Sujata is an architect, urban planner with over 35 years of international experience. She is the MD CEO of UDP International, an award-winning design and planning practice which specializes on sustainable, smart, and collaborative solutions that links people, place, and planet. Dr. Govada is an educator, the global trustee of Urban Land Institute, and founding director of the Institute for Sustainable Urbanization. She is instrumental in setting up several professional institutes and also an advisor to the World Bank on their TOD study. Over to you, ma'am. Please restrict with your presentation time. Please keep in mind the time available with you. Thank you, ma'am.
Ma'am, we can't hear you. We can see the slides. You might have to unmute yourself. We can see the slide, but we can't hear you.
Sujata, ma'am?
Yeah, okay.
Now your
Yes.
sound is good, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
We could see your slides earlier. Yes, we can
Yeah.
see the slide. If you can make it full screen.
Okay. All right. I'll try to be quick. I thank you for the invitation, Mr. Lohia, and others at Romy and Mr. R.K. Singh at IRSDC. I'm actually delighted because I'm an Indian at heart, very much in spite of being away from India for a long time. And it's nice to see these kind of changes happening in India. And I'll just share a little bit about Hong Kong experience and some concluding remarks. Basically, UDP International is something I started back in California, been based in Hong Kong since 1994. We do urban design and planning in the US, Philippines, India, Hong Kong, China. I also set up the Institute for Sustainable Urbanization, mainly to ensure that there is more sustainable development happening in around the world and India as well, of course. And it's more like a think tank. And we've done a lot of things, research. And as part of that, we've developed this framework. And I'm happy to see that there was heritage mentioned. I would also add culture to it. And so our framework focuses on people, place, and planet, but also keeps in mind culture and heritage. And it's technology enabled and then focuses on the 6 elements, which are living, mobility, environment, infrastructure, governance, and economy. But it's based on a spirituality and consciousness foundation. Because I think we need to be compassionate not only to each other, but also to the planet to make sure that we have a real, truly sustainable development going forward. And transit-oriented development, I think I don't need to go through this because you're already embarking on it. It's very important, and I'm glad Railways is doing it. For those of you who don't know too much about Hong Kong, it's a high-density development where TOD is done quite well, sometimes too well to the point it becomes development-oriented transit, and has about less than 8 million population, but only 24% of the land is actually built up. And the car ownership is low. The transit ridership is high. More than 90% of the city is covered by transit. And it actually has other modes besides the MTR, which is the metro, but also buses, trams, minibuses, and taxis. Ferries, even though it's a coastal city, the ferries are very little, could be much more. And the transit ridership is high. MTR capitalizes on station area development to make it not only increase the catchment, but also make it profitable and subsidize the development of the lines as well. There is an integrated development, but also with the public transport interchange, where multiple modes are there that people can easily transit from one to the other. And this is the MTR system. A lot of people criticize that for Hong Kong, there should be a lot more lines than this. But I bear in mind the buses and all others run equally well. And so the MTR system is in a way limited compared to other places maybe. But also know the fact that MTR was only started, KCRC was there before in 1910, but MTR was only came in the late 70s, and they were both merged together in 2007. KCR used to do only the China transit before. Now they're all merged together, and then these are some of the new lines that they're doing: West Island Line, Kwun Tong Line, South Island Line, which goes to the south of Hong Kong. West Island Line goes into the older part of Hong Kong where they've become more sensitive. And the Sha Tin Central link is really connecting to the north, almost closer to to Shenzhen. And the express rail that cut down the travel time from Hong Kong to Shenzhen from 45 minutes to 14 minutes, and to Guangzhou from 2 hours to 47 minutes is also important. And also the Hong Kong-Zhuhai Bridge. The MTR business model has been not only the operations and management of development of the railway line with the proper operation and management, but also ensuring profitability, not only with property development, but also another thing that they've capitalized on is also the advertising, branding, and marketing that happens within the stations and around the stations, and also making sure there's people criticize there are too many malls in all these MTR developments, but I think some form of commercial development is important, but not to go overboard. And also sustainability is another thing that they're looking into. This is, I'll send the presentation. You can look at the details later. But the railway and property development model is what they've actually looked into, where policy, process, project, and organization actually are important. So the government, unlike the railways, the permissions are still done by the town planning board, but in consent with the MTR. So if MTR is developing something, they still need to go to the town planning board to get permissions, and they need to submit and everything. I think with railways, you have made it easier, but so that you can approve your own stations, which is good. And I think also there are other factors like the external factors related to the urban context and other things out of their hand, but government policies, internal factors. MTR is very, very careful about the design and everything, and also how they guide the entire process with the development, even in phases, and then the operations as well, because they're in terms of the planning standards and guidelines, you will be surprised. It's actually not as detailed as what IRS, DC, and Romy and all the team have done there, but they really have one basic mantra. Every station-related development has to have higher density, and they should discourage in the vicinity higher densities elsewhere, so that stations, actually the catchment is increased and there is a footfall in the stations immediately. So that is what the main governing factor is, and that led to other problems too, which I'll share in a minute. So transit-oriented development, they've looked at density, the right type of density. Again, I will emphasize this: distance to transit, the diversity in terms of like different mix of land uses, the accessibility, and this I need to stress, it has to have pedestrian accessibility, because it can very easily become development-oriented transit if you're not careful. And then design is very important with paying attention to details. And just a few stations. The Shamshipur station is an older station, as you can see in the pictures. Street markets, very human scale, which built in 1982. But then as MTR became like, more next generation stations, the Admiralty station is actually quite a interchange station because a lot of lines connect there, and it's quite busy, but they've done it quite well because it also takes the level changes and has bit amount of open space within the area as well. The Kowloon station I think this is where MTR got a bit greedy, I would say, or too development focused, and this went to too much development. Plot ratio, you can see, is at 8.1, but also where the problem came is the entire thing, which is over 14 hectares, this site, this is the site, has development 100% site coverage with 8.1, so that it has many towers in there, and the open space you're seeing is only at the podium level, 7th floor. At the ground level, it is completely segregated, and that's where it got into trouble. And it's also got into trouble because it is too luxury oriented and also didn't cater to the needs of everybody else, the normal people going to offices and needing a lunch. And they had to do other things to retrofit later on, even having minibuses go at lunchtime to the nearby places like Jordan, where you can get a cheap, reasonable meal. Lohas Park is over a depot site, so some of your rail yards can be covered and made into proper developments, but I wouldn't recommend exactly like the MTR, but maybe like you can see Hudson Yards is a pretty good example, I think, in the US, which is done recently, which has its own issues. But here in Lohas Park, they had 50 almost identical towers, which I would disagree as an urban designer. Again, the landscape is on the podium only, and the integration at ground level is not very good. And it's a large site, over 30 hectares, and 100% site coverage again. Sainpun station, which is more in the newer lines, but in an older neighborhood. So MTR had to become very sensitive, had to do community engagement, take feedback from the community, and then create station exits in places closer to the neighborhood and to the waterfront so that people can actually use the station, but also the amenities around, because the MTR station connections become used by the people not only to enter the station, but also to enter other parts of the neighborhood. So that's something you want to keep in mind. Some of the challenges with RNP is maintaining human scale, because you can go overboard very quickly. Walkability and connectivity, and I'm glad in your codes you're mentioning those. And integrating larger scale, if you do podium development, it has to be integrated. It has to be terraced to the ground level, so the street level interaction is there. And it should be truly transit. I would add even pedestrian oriented development, TPOD, rather than development-oriented transit. And so the human scale, some examples here. Tung Chung Station, which is much newer in the newer town, it's better. As you can see in Portland, I think another example here. This is from London, where Oxford Circus, where it used to be like the image on the left, no reason for it to be like that. And the way, the crossing should be more like what they've done now with the image on the right, where it really gives pedestrian priority. The Kowloon station, this is kind of an example of a standalone TOD on the left with no integration, which is a problem. But if it's integrated, then people from the adjacent areas can actually come to the station, and also the vice versa. And the station becomes much more accessible, not only from this one line to the other line, but also within the neighborhood as well, which is very, very important. Then prioritize pedestrian connectivity. As is shown, the Kowloon station with limited pedestrian connections, whereas Chunkwano, another newer station, has much more. And also multimodal transit integration. This is the escalator, which functions beautifully in Hong Kong, connecting between central and mid levels, but also between stations, and also other modes of transit. And also transit with people first. So people and amenity priority should be there. And I agree with the previous speaker, Sham, that landscape has to be built in with the urban design, and not as an afterthought. And urban design shouldn't be as an afterthought either after planning has been done. This is the 10 principles we did to actually challenge the Hong Kong government as well as the MTR, so that they listen to future developments, become more sensitive. Just briefly, building on your strengths, whatever, and these could be applicable at other places too. Create great places. This becomes important, key. Extending the urban grid. A lot of times the urban grid is compromised, and I call it the disappearing of the urban grid is the usual phenomena, which you should not let it happen. And also the open up the public space, not only at ground level, but also multiple levels. And sometimes it's given to private sector initiatives and then it's closed off. So you want to really keep it open throughout, not only during design, but also when it's actually built. Integrate infrastructure, because based on the infrastructure, it actually dictates the type of development that happens. So if you have really wide roads, it is going to dictate more inward-looking development. So that I think is important to be aware of. So streets need to be more human scale, more transparent, connected. And this activating the streets, as this example shows, this is the development scale, this is the pedestrian scale, and most of these are blank walls. And you are making sure through your codes not to make that happen, because it's not okay. And I've heard this flexible, keeping codes flexible. I think this is key, important. Wherever it is for the public good, you want to make it flexible. Wherever it is actually detrimental to the city and the public and the people, then you want to be stricter and to make sure it is actually enforced in that way. So you don't want to be too rigid for the wrong reasons. And promote sustainability, but please go beyond buildings. Go to the neighborhood scale and actually engage people not only early on, but throughout the process, because it's important. You'll never know what kind of insights you hear from people, because once the station is open, the development is open, you can get feedback from how it's actually working. That's important too. And whether it is done by one owner or multiple owners or multiple players, I think managing and controlling and coordinating in a proper way is important. And these were the principles we developed together with the MTR, the government, academia, and the community, and the various stakeholders. And the government was hesitant in the beginning, but now they follow it. And these are some of the lessons and key takeaways, I would say. I think even when you're doing all this station development, make sure the railway operations and the maintenance are actually good and they are of higher standards. So raise the bar, even at the railway operations level, having convenient transfers and efficient multimodal interchanges. Then make sure there is affordability with a lot of, as you see the picture here, it tends to be very high-end luxury, and the segments of the population are booted out. You want to make sure that these stations have some percentage of affordable housing in them. And there is also property management and maintenance, which MTR does very well, is actually included in the development. So that there is like a benchmark that these are good developments, and comfortable, well-designed, and properly maintained public space. And I agree with Mr. Shyam Khandekar saying that you need to think about the public space even before you get into the sublots, and enhancement of the area surrounding. You don't need to focus just on the stations, but see if IRSDC can actually be the driver to make change for the better in the cities, because that's how MTR has done in some of the areas. and also continuous multi-stakeholder engagement, education, and awareness, not only for development, but also how to use things properly and with proper attention to post-COVID-19, the new normal in lifestyle. And I just want to end with one of the questions I think IRS DC asked me before when I presented, what about COVID-19 and will people be using? And I can report back that MTR is running quite well in Hong Kong. People, more than social distancing, what they really follow here is almost 100% masking. They wear masks and people are actually using the MTR pretty much, a little bit dropped, but not because their number of trips have dropped, but they're actually following their strict principles. So I think with that I will end and with a reminder. I think there should be one more. I'm unable to. Okay, there was one other slide. I just wanted to end with saying that cities are for people, and don't forget that we need to be thinking about people, place, and planet while we are developing, and also the culture and heritage, which adds to the identity. At the end of the day, you don't want all stations looking the same. And also, I know your codes make sure that they're looking at local aspects. And with that, I will end the presentation. And I'll be open for any questions later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Sujata ji. Just one question I wanted to ask. When you have mentioned about affordable, high quality station development, property management and maintenance. So can you just elaborate on the property management aspect?
Yeah, because MTR actually is, I don't know if you can see, they actually have become a property manager in a way. So in other words, imagine this, you develop the station area development, but you actually want to make sure that it is developed at a proper, high quality with design and everything. They ensure all that. But even post development, it's actually maintained and leased out properly so that if government announces an MTR line, automatically people are looking forward to be part of that development. If an MTR opens a development somewhere, people are in queues wanting to go and purchase there. So I think this is the type of thing IRSDC has to leverage. So please focus on not only property development, but management as well. You may want to, you can have an operator do it, but you want to oversee and make sure it's actually done properly so that the quality doesn't change. And one thing, if I understand from India, it bothers me every time I go, something new within 5 years looks like 20 years old, or it's been there, it's not maintained properly. Things are changing now, but you still need to pay attention to this. So if you raise the bar a bit high to begin with and dictate, be the authority in dictating terms to all the others who, not only in terms of aesthetics and design quality. I know some of the examples I saw that were shared. I would think the design could be even better than that. So you want to take a little bit more closer call on the allowing the design and making sure that it's actually good. And I also liked the sections that were shown by the previous speaker, because sections are important, because I think these will allow for proper understanding. Because this particular development, you can see the Kowloon station, nobody realized what it really was until it was built, because the podium level was 7 floors high and cars could go up to that level, and people could go up with great difficulty, but nobody could come in from immediately. So that's why I think property management is important, but also being sensitive to development is important. So keeping track of, pedestrian friendliness, and also making sure to hygiene with COVID and everything is key.
So there the development is on public-private partnership, or is the investment by the Hong Kong Metro Rail and then they lease it out or rent it out?
No, they actually do private public partnership. MTR is like a quasi-governmental, so it's also publicly listed, but it then partners with developers. For this particular station, I think there must have been more than 7 different packages with different developers, and each package might have a consortium of developers, and they develop, including the podium, they develop in phases. It's amazing how they do it, but they do it quite well. And they've actually, so their investment, that way they are not putting all the investment themselves. The private sector is actually putting in the investment as well. And the government also gets a share from it, which people criticize because they say, because the government is getting profitable, they are not becoming more sensitive. But the station right next to this station, the Kowloon station, which is the X-Rail, because they made a mistake in this, they made sure that the X-Rail, that the express rail station actually was dropped down to ground level so that it was friendly at ground level. So to answer you, Mr. Lawyer, they do have public-private partnership.
Sure, thank you. What I would suggest is RK and others, since our 2 international speakers, they are having a time difference, so we can have their question answers to them, so that in case if they can continue after the question answer session, that would be great. But at least from our side, they will have the freedom, because people might be wanting to ask questions on these 2 excellent presentations.
Sure, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. We can invite questions. Somebody interested, he can write in the chat box, or can even.
I think one question.
Yes.
I have written a question, RK Singh sir.
Actually, since I was out of net for some time, so I'm not seeing those questions.
So my question is to Shyam Khandekar ji. I am PS Uttarwar, senior expert architecture planning in IRSDC, and we are also approving plans. So in India, sometimes there is a conflict between local bylaws and our codes or our design requirements. So do you experience same thing in Netherlands? And if yes, then how do you resolve it?
Sham, you'll have to unmute yourself.
Yeah. You're saying conflict between the local bylaws and the new codes which you are trying to make. Is that right?
Yeah, new code or the codes you have made in Netherlands for urban design codes or designs for your stations, and local bylaws there itself, because I believe building plan approval is a universal process everywhere.
Yes. So, but the way I think we do it in Netherlands is that you start. The codes come in later. There are, of course, the bylaws which are dictating everything. Okay, so those we obviously will not contradict. Okay, national bylaws on all sorts of things, fire safety regulations, everything, etc. But before starting something, we really have a good urban design and landscape vision. That is the starting point. And after that, we go to the subplots, and then the regulations which we give for the subplots, and they are based on, like I said, sometimes they're based on performance. Some of these codes are performance based. Like, for example, if you have a tall building, the thing will be that in Netherlands you have a lot of wind. So the problem of a tall building in Netherlands is that there is a windfall. The wind hits the building and it goes down and it affects the public space. So the regulation which will be next to the tall building will be that when you build a tall building more than 40 meters, make sure that the public space around it for so many days in a year, you have to, with computer models, show that it does not have wind speeds higher than so much, like that. So, so there is never a conflict. The thing is how to be creative within that, because obviously we cannot contradict the national codes. But we create the form-based codes in a creative way, and they're not nationally across the country the same. So for a particular project, you create again your codes.
Oh, thank you very much. I think that clarifies our point. Thank you.
We have two questions from Ms. Ved Lakshmi Nayak. This is regarding visual clutter. She has suggested that we should take care for visual clutter also at the station so that our stations are visible. Another, she has told that noise control should also be factored in our codes. So I think we are taking care. Anybody from our side will take this question? Romi, you would like to address?
RK, what I would suggest, kindly segregate the questions to two parts. The questions to our speakers, Sujata ji
Okay.
and Shyam Khandekar ji. So
Yes,
that
actually.
now remaining questions, because they are other generic questions. So in any case, we'll be taking up after we have the other panelists to speak.
Okay, sir. But there is no other question in the chat box to our
So there are
distinguished.
some. If you allow me, I'll just ask
Yes,
those
yes,
questions.
Adish, please.
Yeah.
Achha,
So
maybe earlier. I'm not able to see in my.
Miss ho gaya tha na, next
Yes,
time.
yes, sir.
So there's one question from Champaka Rajgopal, and I'm assuming that this is directed towards Mr. Khandekar. So PPP-based developments are generally governed by long-term contracts. Each station in the case studies shared must entail a variety of contracts, some long-term, others medium-term, depending on the estimation of IRR. Do these long and medium-term contracts impact FBCs? If yes, in what ways? The FSI built-up area is needless to say is also determined based on IRR. The ratio of public open spaces, parking, and built-up area keeps moving ahead. Sorry. Built-up areas would likewise affect the IRR. Yeah, Sham, over to you.
In this particular project, which I showed you in Netherlands, there was a public-private partnership. Okay. And while it was next to the railway station, railway was not part of the partnership. The city was part of the partnership. Actually, it is very similar to what Mr. Sujata Gowada said about Hong Kong, that the city regulations are valid, and the city is the partner. It actually goes through the plans which they have to be sanctioned by the city. That is the local authority. In case of this Palaiskoti, the project I showed, there was a public-private partnership in which the city was part of the public-private partnership and a long-term partnership, and that remained right through. And the amount of, clearly there was an urban design vision initially in which the amount of public space and the amount of built-up area was agreed upon so that the financial viability was guaranteed. But that was a monitoring model. It didn't say this is exactly how we are going to do it. Because as things went forward, in 30 years, things change. You know, if you think of what you knew 30 years back about today, you'll be amazed that you hardly knew anything about what is happening today. You hardly knew anything about 30 years. So how can we think of 30 years from now? So the point is to have some main lines of agreement on which you agree, and then concentrate on I continue to say, on the public space as the main generator, not for any transport oriented development, but actually not only for the people who use it, but also for the real estate value. Because if the public space is good, the real estate value will be higher. I'm absolutely convinced of this from the experience I have. So the concentration on building the buildings first, it doesn't make sense.
There's one question from Ms. Jasmine, and this is directed towards Sujata ma'am. How has public participation been ensured in the project? Has the public feedback been taken into consideration?
I would say, as I tried to show, am I on mute? No. Okay, as I tried to show in different stations, in the middle, like Hong Kong MTR became like too much into development focused, right? And then there was an public outcry. And especially when they came into the Western District, which was the last station I showed on Sayan Pun, the whole government had put down that it was mandatory for them to engage the community. And actually, as part of the process, And they did. And actually, they did take the feedback. And through that, you will notice in the older sections, they didn't go with such elaborate development because they knew the priority was less. And also in another area like Wang Chuk Hang, where it is a depot site, usually depot sites, they have larger areas that they can develop over. They have, in fact, MTR literally told me, we are listening to your principles, we are following them. The Wang Chuk Hang station is going to be designed much more sensitively. So whatever mistakes they've done through this process, they've actually maintaining it. And I would say, yes, public feedback is taken into account because of these mistakes were made earlier. And Hong Kong people are quite vocal, as all of you know, especially after the handover, I would say. And public engagement is only happening after the handover since 97, and more so lately. But I think it's good to see that there is that, and the reason why I said it should be continuous, because sometimes you might have the engagement and then you can have the development, and then people forget about looking at how it's actually working and taking feedback from that, and maybe getting some insights from the users that maybe certain things should have been done differently. And then you can use that feedback to improve other station developments.
Yes, ma'am, wanted to add one point why I asked this question, because in India, what we are seeing, a lot of stations or such, transit projects, they would involve slum development or some redevelopment. So how to ensure that those people are not just moved, say, 20 kilometers out of the city? We end up creating something, but then the interests of those people are just not thought of.
I would say in Hong Kong, this is one thing I'm actually trying to work on. There is right now, affordable housing is not part of the MTR developments. And that's why they do get criticized for that, because it's very high-end luxury. And even Urban Renewal Authority, which is supposed to be more sensitive, they also go to, until recently, I should say, go into very high-rise luxury development. And it's only now that they're more focusing on public space and all this, but affordable housing as a mandate is not still there. But I'm trying to actually promote that and include, at least say, start with 10% and build up towards 30% eventually. I had in fact asked the question to our earlier speaker, Mr. Fabrice, and he responded to me that even in France, 30% is what they use, because I think that is critical. Because in MTR, when they did the Kowloon station, one of the things they learned the hard way, it was high-end luxury development for residential, even commercial, even in the malls, it was only high-end restaurants. So what happened was the people working in these developments did not have a place to go for lunch, or they could not afford to have lunch every day in these high-class restaurants. So they had to put buses to go to nearby Jordan area because the connections are not good. So through this, they learned that the connecting to the neighboring areas is important. And I know you're talking about slum revitalization as well. I think having that affordable housing component in the TOD becomes important, and hearing to their voices, because they could again get jobs in the TOD development as well. And that, I think, is another way of improving their livelihood as well, rather than shifting. And this is done everywhere, even Barcelona. I mean, people are bodily moved. China does it all the time. And then later realizes that actually it's not the best thing to do. In Hong Kong, I wouldn't say MTR, but the Urban Renewal Authority has a policy now that flat for flat, if suppose somebody is removed from the area, they're given a choice to actually have a space within the area. And then if they don't like it, then they will opt to go elsewhere. So that is happening in the Urban Renewal Authority, because there is a very sensitive MD now. Mr. Lohia, someone like yourself, who's actually spearheading Mr. CSY, spearheading the Urban Renewal Authority now in Hong Kong.
So the remaining questions are more or less general, which we can take towards the end, and some comments. I think we can start with the round table now.
Yes, thank you very much, all the international experts. Now we can move to roundtable discussion. First of all, I will like to.
So Dataji and Shyamji, in case if you can stay back later on also, it will be great. But you will have the freedom as you choose. So we can
I
move.
will stay. Can I just say
Yeah,
one thing before I go? I'll
Yes.
stay just for a short time, but one thing I just wanted to say before I left, and this is related to something which you talked about, eyes on the street, which is of course very important. But in case of particularly railway stations, you see eyes on the street for the streets which are up in the air, but which are also underground. So even there, they have to be somehow eyes on the street. That photograph which you showed of Habibganj, for example, you saw this thing going all the way, and there could be cameras, I know, but that is not what is eyes on the street. I mean, so if you might want to look at very long back, Toronto had developed an underground system of pedestrians, and they figured out a system of design by which even natural light would come in once in a while into that underground areas. That gives, so please consider that as you go forward.
I fully agree. I'll just make a comment here, Shyamji. This is the subway beneath the tracks. So beneath the tracks, that becomes a challenge. But when we are having subways which are beneath the roads, etc., so there we can raise the roads and we can do all those kind of things. And as Joint Secretary Urban Transport, this was one of the things which I had been pushing across the country, that when you make pedestrian subways, just make them 1.5 meter below the ground and raise the ground level or the road level 1.5 meters, so that you are 3 meter clear and you have natural light also coming inside. So I fully agree with you, but when we are constructing below the tracks, there are certain challenges. But if you have some international examples where these challenges have been addressed, we would certainly like to know and incorporate in our designs as well.
Sir, if I may, one thing is even another thing you want to consider is also signage in those spaces, even if it is, so it's not just a blank space. Montreal is also a great example of how they've used art and everything. So you can actually activate these areas and make them, even holding events and things like that, they can make them much more user friendly.
Art is coming. In fact, all the area is just now finished, so the art is in the process of installation.
Okay.
All the buildings, etc., which have just been completed, and this was the instruction which in fact, I had a discussion. So they were already planned, but last week only we had the discussion on this. So I certainly agree that the place have to be live. So it is not only eyes on the street. In case of Habibganj, we also had the challenge of the size of the survey. Otherwise, normally I push for some kind of people presence in the subway, so that your eyes are not only the camera, it is human interface as well, because physical presence is what gives the confidence, not only the camera.
Yeah, true.
Thank you, sir. Now we would like to move towards roundtable discussion. First of all, I will like to introduce all the panelists one by one, and I will request the panelists to stick to their time. 5 minutes each panelist is allotted. Actually, we are left with around 45 minutes, so we can extend by, if permitted by all, around 10-15 minutes. So it is just 1 hour left. So 5 minutes each. There are 6 panelists, so 30 minutes for them and 30 minutes for discussion. So our first panelist is Mr. Anurag Chofla, who is the president of IUDI and an architect, urban designer with over 40 years of experience, associated with Stain Doshi Bhalla, which later became Stain Mani Chofla, and lastly Urban Architecture Works. Mr. Chofla is an award-winning urban designer. He is a visiting faculty, jury member, and lecturer at many schools in India and abroad. He has also served as advisor to the Delhi Arts Commission since 1999, an apex body charged with approving all large physical projects in Delhi and responsible for Delhi's urban landscape. So over to you, Mr. Anurag. Mr. Anurag?
So seems like there's some bandwidth issue. Now you are, sir.
Yes.
So can you hear me, Darsha?
Yes, we are.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Behind
I think at this
so I don't
sound.
know what the. So if you can't hear, just go ahead in the other panel.
So do you want me to connect you over phone? I can do that. Would
No,
you want to
just
put
go
your
ahead with. I'll try.
suggestions
I'll
over
try to
phone?
fix it. Just go ahead with the other panelists. I'll join
Sure,
later.
sure.
So,
Sir, we can move ahead with the other panelists.
okay. So,
Sir, we'll
yes, we'll come back to Mr. Anurag later on. Our next panelist is Mr. Arunava Dasgupta. He is an urban designer and HOD of Urban Design Department and the founder and coordinator of Center for Urban Design Innovation at SPA, Delhi. So Dasgupta is the founder, member and vice president of IUDI and promotes equitable and holistic urban design. He is also an advisor to the state governments, is a part of the Heritage Conservation Committee at NCT of Delhi and a member of educational boards and examination panels in various programs in India and abroad. So over to you, Mr. Arunava.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. Can you hear me? Or
yes,
see me?
yes.
I also, yeah, thank you so much. First of all, congratulations to all of you in the IRSDC for this tremendous as well as an ambitious initiative that you have put forward for our country. It is one of those initiatives which I think is going to become a game changer in the way we see public funds and public areas getting developed for general use as well as for specific purposes of movement and transportation of people and goods. So I have been involved a little bit earlier in the conceptualization stages of these activities that you had presented today. So I will not get into those aspects in detail. Let me first say that both in terms of the planning phase as well as in terms of the subplot form-based coding phase, there has been a tremendous amount of work, and that I hope is going to result in something finally which is going to be wholesome and integral to the purposes and the objectives of this initiative. I have a few broad points to speak of. I think these are only being said because over and above the achievements that you already have. I have pages of notes in terms of what you could have pointed out in small dimensions of every form-based coding aspect or every presentation that has been shared with you. But let me broadly talk about 2 or 3 aspects. One is, the idea that the station area is a gateway to the city and a gateway for the city is, I think, something that we all know, that every transportation node, especially at the scale of the city, becomes its gateway. The point that I'm raising here is, how do we introduce the city through its gateway? One is the design of the gateway itself, and that I think the station building design will be taking care of as much as possible. But how do we introduce the city through the gateway is an important point that I'm raising. The reason being that right at the beginning, we found out that there was a connection that this project is trying to make between the requirements of railway-based transit as well as the city within which this transit facility is located. Now, the synergy between the city and this transit point or this transit area, I think, has to be worked upon in greater detail, which means that something about the city needs to get reflected, not necessarily only in terms of its iconic value by boldness and hugeness and largeness or monumentality of the structure that I have, but actually in terms of the urban character that the city represents, which means there needs to be an urban character-driven study, which will tell us this is the kind of response we need by the development in this kind of a gateway precinct. That I think is a very important dimension. Otherwise, we might tend to create homogeneous development all across maybe the 8,000 station areas that you have in this country. I feel that there is an important measure of creating distinctiveness through urban study of the city itself. That's my first point that I would like to make. And this is the reason I'm saying this is because of the response that I have generated out of seeing all the proposals that are coming across. You know, there is a requirement to attach ourselves with the scalar quality of the physical environment that the city has and the scalar quality that we are now trying to generate within the precinct itself, not within its own members of urban artifacts that are there within the precinct, but also around the precinct. I feel that there might be a requirement for us to see it even more closely. There is a point that was mentioned before by Sujata ji, and I think it's already been talked about by Sham ji also. I want to reinforce the point. The point is the intermediate scale between the scale of the city and the scale of the station area. The intermediate scale is the scale of the precinct within which the station is located. I think the partnership that we were talking about, and I think there was a question raised about this conflict between planning norms or building norms versus station area development proposals. I think the key lies in developing the partnership between the city and the railways, not to be seen in isolation. And I know that that is an objective already that you have stated at the outset of this discussion. How do we build this partnership? One of the ways to build this partnership is to say that the station area design is part of a precinct area design, right? Within which the station area fits itself. The precinct area design has to happen through this partnership synergy between the city authority and the station authority. And I think that area level design idea needs to be put in place, within which the station area design will then get dovetailed or fitted. Otherwise, I have a fear that these station area designs might become islands of excellence and push out many, many important criteria of development which into the precinct that is surrounding it, but not equipped to absorb it, right? So there is therefore this danger of discontinuity. I'm not talking about discontinuity only in terms of aesthetics, but actually in terms of urban operations, which is a little problematic. The third aspect which I found most of the presentations not talking about, and I feel it is important for us to consider, is this entire discussion of the movement of goods and logistics related to railway stations. I found a tremendous amount or an overwhelming predominance of attention on passenger-based commuting and passenger-based requirements related to the movement systems of railway areas. But railway areas are also about goods movement. And why I am saying this again is because the messiness, I am not talking about messiness in a derogatory way, but in a real way. The messiness of movement and functional systems that happened around railway areas happens primarily because there is a discordance between the way passengers want to move and the way goods have to travel. It happens within the railway station itself, and it also happens surrounding it. In fact, the surrounding areas respond to goods movement much more significantly than just about passenger movement. So warehousing, logistics of transfer of goods from one mode to another mode, all kinds of activities happen around railway stations. So however pristine we might want the station areas to be, they start getting affected in different ways because of this criteria. I didn't find that happening as a discussion in any of the subplot level questions or even in the planning questions, which I think I would like to point out. The other point out that thing that I needed to point out, and I think it goes back to a question that was raised, was this question of community engagement. Now, it is a vexed question, I know, because we're talking about very, very large scale developments with very, very complex, stakeholder requirements of aspirations as well as necessities. But how do we create a community engagement structure? It is not coming out through the way in which we are imagining the project development structure. Now that community engagement structure, I know we are doing a stakeholder consultation now through professional engagement. but through different kinds of community levels, how is this structure getting created? Because at the end of the day, if we say that the subplots is only about commercial development, by the way, I have a little bit of a problem about naming the project as commercial development of railway land. It would be nice to talk about multifunctional development of railway land. The very moment we talk about commercial development, we get our entire mindset fixated towards revenue returns, and that is not necessarily the function of a public sector based development that we are talking about, right? So can there be a value based idea implanted within this projectization process, which is about community development? Can there also be a community development card when we're talking about a property development card? What will that community development card entail? Will it happen in every property, or will it happen in another subplot or a group of subplots which will focus on community development measures? And this community development is not only about housing. It's not just about toilets and sanitation. It's actually about the entire gamut of what is required for development of community enterprise and living within such areas. It's about shelter, livelihood, and livability simultaneously. Now, how can we develop a card related to that specifically? And that's the main point that I would have liked to see as an addition to all that has happened. There are many other points. I would only want us to focus a bit on an outside-in approach now and see what that outside-in approach will generate, in addition to the inside-out approach that we have so beautifully figured out so far. So I just limit myself to that. There are many, many things to say, but some other time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Das Gupta, for very, very good suggestions. We'll certainly look into all of these, sir. Our experts will look into this. Mr. Adarsh will take care about this. Now, I think Mr. Anurag has connectivity, proper connectivity. We can switch over to him. Sir, you are okay now?
Yeah, let me try again. Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Okay. So, as President of IUDI, it falls upon me to thank IRSDC and RLDA for initiating this conversation with urban designers. And I think it's a great initiative, and I hope that the urban design community is enthused and encouraged and continues this engagement with the organizers of this conference. Now, many of the say actually these are actually the same things in my mind. Railway stations were, and to some extent are, the civic and commercial hubs of Indian cities. And they're also major transport nodes. And the district around the railway station is very often seen as the city center, or if not a city center, at least a major important sub-center. And for many people, the idea of the city is formed by this district. The point of gate runner was talking. I mean, imagine the first encounter a rural Indian who migrates to the city has the first encounter they have with urbanity. That is the railway station. And this is not only personal to people. This imagery is our culture. It is in our art, in our music, and the cultural not be underestimated.
Connectivity issues there.
I also want to just make a quick point about form-based codes. Can you hear me?
So your voice is breaking in between. We are not.
Now you are.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. Now we can.
Maybe if you can switch
it'll
off your
keep going
video,
away. So whenever you want me to stop, just tell me. Okay. Okay. So I had two questions. I'll skip the rest. And again, one question was about how does one extend your RLDA lands form-based codes into the city master planning process. Again, I don't know if I touched on this point of how do we create a design linkage with a larger precinct. Now, in Romi's presentation, I saw an examination of a larger area outside the station. But my question was, is that just at your group's presentation effort, or has actual interaction with the city authorities who are responsible for developing the master plan and zoning around the station, has actual discussion with them happened? And is there some kind of cooperative engagement, especially at the seams between the urban area around the station and your property? The second point I had was really about, there are so many people who depend on the station and its activities for their lives and their livelihood. And not all these people are reflected in these development plans. These people work there, but many of them also live there. And how are these plans going to integrate the thousands of people who gather around these stations? How are these communities going to be integrated with your new development targets in a productive and integrated manner? Because some of the imagery which was suggested seems to float above this community. Some of the imagery seems to be exclusionary. And even if that was not the intent of the designers, but that is a risk. That these stations will again become islands for a development-based community. So I'll just leave it with these two concerns. And thank you very much for organizing an excellent interaction and I look forward to great opportunities we will have to keep on consulting with each other. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Your questions are really very valid, and we'll certainly take care about them while designing our layout plan. We would like to now move to next panelist. She's Miss Brinda Sastry, who is a urban designer and adjunct faculty in the urban design program at RV College of Architecture, Bengaluru. In the last 20 years, she has worked on the city, regional and neighborhood plans and public space designs in India and the USA. Her work includes preparing visions, policies, zoning regulations, urban design plans, design guidelines, and participatory process for station area plans for TOD. She develops methods to embed place-based urban design strategies within the planning policy and governance framework. So over to you, Ms. Brinda Sastry.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm just going to share one slide which will give an overview of what I intend to speak about. Please tell me if it's visible.
Yes, ma'am. It is visible.
All right. So I have to mention that a lot of points that I'm planning to speak about today is already kind of covered by a few people, and I really would like to thank Ms. Sujata for the fleeting mention of Portland, because a lot of what I want to present today comes from my experience having worked in Portland on transit-oriented development and particularly station area plans. Also, what I would want to start off with, I know I can't cover all of these points, but specifically, I would like to mention that the visioning process that has been mentioned in the documents and as one of the requirements of a vision plan I would like to kind of indicate that this would be the crux and the core of how you could engage the local community and create a vision that would represent some of the local needs, as well as the visioning process could form a basis for identifying certain form-based codes that would be useful for how to represent the local contextual kind of situation and contextual design features that could be represented within the station area. My second point is regarding the integration with the city's regional or master plan. A very good example for how station areas can be integrated within the city master plan, where the station could take on a role for either becoming a city center or a regional center or even a local commercial hub, depending on the location of the station and the size of the plots that are available in and around the station. And the station areas can also kind of look towards what the city's growth strategy is, or even the regional growth strategy, to be able to kind of understand how they can integrate themselves within the growth management plan for the city. Portland, Oregon has done a very interesting method. They've used an interesting method of a regional plan where they have assigned specific design types to the station areas. Not only just station areas, but also their main streets and city center areas and hubs. So there is a possibility of these areas taking on a role which is much more integrated with the city's growth strategy or even a regional growth strategy. The third point is regarding the TOD policy. The TOD policy takes into consideration the idea of what is called the station area plan. And the station area plan also, in the TOD policy, there is a mention of an influence area around the station area. I would like to say that we should use this opportunity to interpret how this influence area for these particular rail lands can be integrated into the design process. And I see like a huge absence of what one would call the urban design plan. I know that all the elements and the layers that are necessarily going to come into an urban design plan, like all your mobility networks, as well as the introduction of public space and all of that, are articulated in the regulating plan or the plan that is supposed to help implement the FBCs. But a conclusive, overarching urban design plan is extremely important to kind of flesh out the ideas of how this place would embed itself within the contextual frame. So I feel like there is a need to introduce that. The role of the urban design plan would also include how the FBCs would get implemented within the area. And there is a necessity to identify how there is a transition between how development in or on these plots will impact the surrounding areas. So that would be the influence areas. Coming to the regulating plan, which is which is perceived specifically in the form-based codes as a plan which is going to implement the FBCs. I do echo with previously mentioned thoughts on how it needs to be a little more flexible, because it may, for example, it may sometimes prevent the use of indigenous typologies. Every time the perimeter block may not necessarily be the option. And there might be some indigenous typologies in certain locations that can be actually, there should be room for kind of putting in those kinds of design options. Looking at the form-based codes itself, I have a lot of comments. I will not get into the details, but the role of the local body in regulating this is very important, as already mentioned. And the other concern is that when we look at these station plans, which is looking within the perimeter of the land owned by the railway lands, but not looking beyond it, as I see it, the problem I anticipate is that when we represent these plots or areas on a city's master plan, how will they get represented? Will they have a zoning on them? I know it's the commercial zone, which is currently being looked at, but beyond that, how would it be a spot zone, which is not necessarily recommended? How is it going to integrate with the zoning which is in the surrounding areas? Not just the zoning, but also the development potential of the areas around it. The next point is like to address the idea of making it flexible, the FBCs flexible. There is a process which can be looked at, which is looking at more of how the urban design plan would be fleshed out, which is a discretionary design review process where we can bring out certain design guidelines. For example, there was a discussion on art and introducing art. It is impossible to use FBCs to mandate art, but a discretionary design guideline, which can be actually flexible and interpreted by the local community and or the designers, could be introduced. And so a set of guidelines is what I would recommend, which is something that has worked beautifully in the city of Portland. And honestly, this comes from my understanding of, what is the institutional challenges of, implementing certain design guidelines in the context of a city. So there is this problem of it becoming too rigid and difficult to kind of manipulate and or manipulate probably is the wrong word, but kind of be flexible enough to interpret it to the local conditions and to gain certain urban design kind of outcomes. And the other end of it would be that they become too flexible and you don't get the necessary design outcomes. So from this perspective, a combination of using form-based codes and discretionary design review processes would really be useful to adopt in this sort of a setting. The last 2 points have to do with how you could actually implement the project, and I keep emphasizing the importance of having the local community being part of what we had actually put in place for the draft master plan for Bangalore. Some of us who had worked on it. Created for the old mill lands a coordinated planning scheme, which was not necessarily adopted by the city, but it was something that would facilitate some kind of a coordination between the project partners and the local community to identify the program for the space. In some instances, there would be housing, since it's the TOD mandates that there would be a little percentage of housing necessary in these areas, but other public amenities that are necessary in the vicinity could also be housed in these schemes. And those kinds of programs can only get generated when there is this partnership that is being built between all the players and actors that are in the area. Lastly, I would suggest that we should put out an evaluation framework for ourselves. Having put such detailed guidelines and all the documents, it is absolutely necessary to have an evaluation framework that would help us assess where we are and how we can move further, because these guidelines need to be very anticipatory and look at how we can actually maybe even adapt for future needs. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for your valuable suggestions. We are running out of time, so we'll immediately move to the next speaker. Our next panelist is Seetha Ragpati, who is the CEO and Principal Urban Designer of Seagull Studio, a master planning and architecture practice based in Chennai, India. She is also a senior consultant for the World Bank, the Asian Development Bank, and CITES project with the National Institute of Urban Affairs, India. Ms. Seetha specializes in master planning and urban design and has more than 14 years of extensive experience in project design and delivery across India, Singapore, Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, Myanmar, and USA. Her areas of expertise include township, mixed-use, airports, infill, and urban revitalization. TOD, urban waterfronts, public housing, and the development of detailed urban design guidelines. So over to you, ma'am.
Right, thank you. Hope everybody can see me and hear me well. And first of all, at the outset, a big congratulations to the IRSDC team for putting together a very robust framework for station redevelopment. Certainly a first of its kind in India, and places urban design at the core of the development agenda. By integrating best practices in urban design and renewal with infrastructure building and revenue-focused commercial development, it certainly brings together the public and private through a very good approach. I think the key highlights for me as I went through the documents is the legibility and the simplicity. They succeed in breaking down what are complex form-based codes into simple, understandable, and implementable guidelines. So I'm very interested to see, following the outcomes of these guidelines when applied to redevelopment across India in stations. As the consultation today is more focused on the form-based codes, I will limit my observations to documents 3A and 3B. Although some points would be broader, many of them have been already mentioned by speakers and panelists ahead of me. As well as presentations made earlier, including the one by Romi. So I think there are very many resonant themes that are emerging. But just in terms of my observations, I've organized the thematic observations into 3 categories, starting first with the development framework, and then I'll speak a bit about integration, and then finally conclude with points around harmony and human scale. So I'll start with the first one on development framework. Here I focus on a couple of things, starting with the focus of the document itself. I think the live, work, play, the 24/7 concept comes through quite clearly in the visioning. But my question is, given the nature and scale of development, has particular attention been paid to climate resilience and adaptability? Surely sustainability was mentioned in passing in one of the earlier presentations, but given the kind of shocks and stresses we face, both natural and man-made, apart from the architecture-focused green building codes, what are the urban design strategies and guidelines we're putting forth to ensure that these projects, that are mega projects, are resilient in the years to come? The second observation under development framework is about market demand. Early in one of the documents, you talk about the land due diligence, and that to be required, will be reviewed by IRSDC. But along with that, would you also be reviewing the market demand studies undertaken by the master developer? Given the scale of the development and the ambition, are there any policy level guidelines that will ensure meaningfully addressing market gaps while also looking at optimum return for the developers? So it's not just a developer-driven market demand, but also IRSDC having a seat at the table in that conversation. The third point under development framework is about optimal urban density. I think most of the speakers touched upon this, and I reiterate. So while we understand that these stations can be developed autonomously and that there are processes about consulting with ULBs, the methodology for the assessment and alignment with the city's infrastructure and carrying capacity is a bit unclear. And this is, of course, critical when we take on large developments. So in case the assessment suggests that there is need for mitigation, IRSDC, in conjunction with the developer, can formulate these mitigation measures and guidelines. So that's the first bucket. I will go through the other two a little quicker. The second one on integration, and here I refer to integration with the surrounding fabric as well as within the development. With respect to surrounding fabric, again, most speakers touched upon this. Codes do spell out clearly what's permitted and not permitted within the subplots. Of course, we also have the overall canvas in terms of the layout plan. But more emphasis and clarity would be welcome on the treatment of the interstitial spaces, this thresholds between the station plot and the neighboring context. Especially when we talk about integrating with small residential and commercial developments, because we're talking about this mega project, and very many times in cities across India, just outside these railway stations, we have very small residential and commercial establishments. So what are the urban design strategies we're going to deploy when we have to jump scales in that vast degree? Within the development, a couple of quick points. One on the spatial integration. The green areas, there's a clear mention of the 10%, but of course, a point here about running the risk of becoming isolated pockets or enclave green spaces, very much like our OSRs, the open space reservations in many cities. So what are the kinds of checks and balances we're keeping for that in terms of the open space design? The second on relation to access. So it makes it clear, the document, that pedestrian pathways will be accessed 24/7, while there would be paid facilities with operational hours. Of course, this is logical and important, but also we want to ensure that these green spaces don't turn into, what General Caden calls in New York City, privately owned public spaces. So how do we ensure that equitable access? In the interest of time, I do have some more details there, but I'm skipping over to the last theme on harmony and human scale. Starting with harmony, we understand that this is a broad guideline covering a range of development scenarios. There was a lot of discussion on the specificities of the city context. But again, if the document could go one step further in addressing this, for example, even if the codes cannot respond to all contexts, aspects around unifying features for integrity, something you mentioned in the parlance of the heritage code, can be extended beyond that to become an overarching theme for all station developments. So this is loud and clear. I think a lot of thought has already been put in terms of your end, but from coming at it from the developer's end, more clarity on this side would be helpful. And again, Arunava ji had talked about the whole idea of commercial. I know, the land use is categorized as commercial, but in reality, when we have mixed use developments, we will have residential, commercial, etc. So how are the subplots going to look at those guidelines in a more nuanced fashion? Going beyond what we're saying in the architecture document, how will the subplot reconcile these residential, commercial, and other interfaces that we would be facing? With regard to human scale, curious if there are any minimum and maximum dimensions for the subplots. Again, how do we work with what is around us in terms of scale? Streetscape, another area where the human scale can be further emphasized. Earlier speakers had also talked about it. For example, is the footpath width standard regardless of what it adjoins? Or will it be nuanced whether it faces an F&B stretch versus a residential tower entrance? So these kinds of points could be brought out a bit more clearly, I felt. And last is sort of an overall observation on the categorization. I think Brinda had also touched upon this. It would be beneficial to categorize our guidelines into must-haves and nice-to-haves, because in a country like India, where FBCs are still in sort of a nascent stage, providing additional recommendations that the developer can pick up, would be helpful. And so there would be some that are non-negotiable, and additional points, if one complies, you could have appropriate financial or other incentives. So my closing line would be, something we've all been talking about over the past several hours. Essentially, this is an exercise in site planning for a mega project. It could become something very inward-looking. We're all trying to break away from that mold. So as urban designers, looking at it in a holistic manner is imperative to make sure we're sustainable and successful in our outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sita. Now we'll like to move to next panelist, Mr. Harsh Mistry, who is an urban designer with interdisciplinary experience in implementing various national and state level missions and schemes. He has been involved with various multidisciplinary organizations and has worked in the area of urban design, master planning, smart cities, and multimodal integration. He has participated in various international architecture and urban design competitions and workshops. He is also engaged in academics in various educational institutions in Mumbai. So over to Mr. Harish Mistry, please.
Good afternoon. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes. First of all, I congratulate IRSDC for such a comprehensive and detailed framework of which is more focused on urban design, and it would be interesting to see the railway stations in altogether the state of art kind of an architecture in the coming years. So heartiest congratulations for that. Regarding the FBCs, I have briefly gone through the guidelines and do have a couple of concerns. Most of the points are touched upon by the major experts so far. But just to add on to it, there are two major concerns out of these that I do not understand the scale of this development, where I understand that the railway stations are being categorized into class A, class B, class C, as per the railways coding, like how much I'm aware about it. So this development is I think applicable to a particular kind of a scale and a type of railway station. Uh, so in that case, what happens to the class B or tier 2 or tier 3 stations where the development around is already is existing and is of a particular type. So adding on to it that what I want to question is that there is railways have been in India since more than 100 years now. So there is already an existing ecosystem uh, uh, which uh, which exists I think since I think so many years, and so how does this FBC fit into this existing mechanism? Uh, and I think certain stations are evolved at that point of time because of a particular kind of an activity. So then, in that activity, how does this generalized and standardized FBCs fit into these specific activity? For example, I think I do not know if railways intend to develop tier 2 stations or commuter stations like Sabzi Mandi or Sadar Bazaar. So Sabzi Mandi is a city level vegetable wholesale market, okay, and I think once upon a time an APM. So then if there is a specific kind of an activity prevailing in that precinct, so then how does this state of art kind of infrastructure fit into this activity? Also, I think other points like social cohesions and informality are, how do we address that? So because that has already been covered by the experts before. So how do we address the social cohesion and the informal sector, which is existing, which has a strong hold in the station precinct since, like, I think since its existence. Uh, the second point was from a user perspective, where um, I think for a commuter, a railway station is more of a transit point where he might not be able to envisage or appreciate or recreate the activities around. So I think the major concern is that for a user, okay, especially for the stations like Mumbai, where I've been brought up with, how do I quickly disperse from a crowded place, getting down from a platform and then going out to my uh, uh, office or wherever I intend to go. So I think though the guidelines are very comprehensive, it's addressing the pedestrian infrastructure, the vehicular infrastructure, and other modes of mobility. But then I think when we talk about transit stations, most important factor is that how should we consider the pedestrian movement? Okay, because also there are types of pedestrians, there are types of commuters. One who are of a daily commuter type, and then also there are people who kind of enjoy and recreate the station precincts, who are the tourists. So then there are this type of commuters which are a part of these railway stations on daily and I think occasional basis. So then accordingly the spaces should manifest. So I think the guidelines should focus on these kind of these infrastructure. I think in Mumbai, how much ever improvement on a ground level we kind of envisage, but then there is no space for the pedestrians to, I think, move comfortably or to roam around. So I think Mumbai has gone for the segregation of vertical segregation of pedestrian and vehicular traffic. So I think the skywalks, I think, which are there majorly failed, but in couple of stations, skywalks act as a dispersal and concentration points for the people to move from one place to another very conveniently. So I think it is high time that we consider the vertical segregation of pedestrian infrastructure and the vehicular infrastructure. So this was another point. Also, the TOD guidelines speak that we should now focus towards NMT infrastructure and e-mobility. So I think we promote cycling infrastructure also as a part of guidelines, where as a student or as a citizen, I would easily get on the railway station, take the PBS and then reach my destination. So I think even cycling infrastructure is important to consider. Yeah, I think that's from my side, and I thank IRSDC to, giving me an opportunity to speak. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harsh. You have raised really very valid questions. Rather, I would like to say that although I am not an expert, but I would like to say that all the questions are being addressed while we are planning our stations. So it is not that everything cannot be covered in a small document, but when detailed planning is being done, our experts are there. Ms. Romi is there. MD sir itself has been a very expert on this, so they can answer very well. But I would like, because time is short, so I would like to say that all questions are being addressed while we are planning our stations. So thank you very much for your suggestions. We would like to move now to our next panelist, Mr. Vikas Kanojia, who is an architect, urban designer, a founding partner of Studio Code. Mr. Kanojia is an expert in green and brownfield projects of varied scale, context, and complexity. He is presently involved with the streetscape projects for the streets of NW and Northwest and Northeast Delhi, focusing on public spaces, walkability, and integration of public transportation systems. Mr. Kanojia has served as the chairperson of the Institute of Urban Designers India, Delhi NCR chapter. So over to you, Mr. Vikas. We have already
I know I'll keep it short, sir. Don't worry. So first of all, thank you to Sujata ma'am and Sham sir for their, very nicely articulated presentations and bringing about, very important issues related to station development. And congratulations to the IRSD team for, putting this all forward and all the, form-based codes. There are a few things I would like to highlight that, here we are talking about some 8,000 stations right now. And what I really feel is that, all stations cannot be viewed from a single lens. All stations, are ingrained in various kinds of complexities, scales, the kind of land use or the functions, throughout the history. They have been, like economic generators, whether it's an industrial railway station or it's a market railway station, so various kinds of land uses have flourished around them. But the good thing is that you are prioritizing the agenda of the brownfield urban renewal. So I would say that, the first thing that comes to mind is basically to define these different railway stations into hierarchies, and then detail out prototypes for various types, that are there. Because these 8,000 stations are, have various kinds of types. So one framework cannot fit, all the stations. So that is one. The second interesting aspect is, which was brought about by both the presenters, is that we should start from public spaces. Any kind of urban regeneration, whether we look at Barcelona, we look at Berlin, they all started with public space as the first thing. And that's what, they defined that first for any site or for the development and overall city. And that's how they started to build the city with an urban design precinct plan. Now that urban design precinct plan is very important because that defines the linkages with respect to the surrounding uses, with respect to the surrounding human networks that already exist on the site. As Anurag sir was also pointing out that, we see that there should be no exclusion. This should be a public space which should be accessible to all. So human networks which exist right now, should be well documented, and it would be provided for them. As if I take an example that, today the vitality of the railway station is because of the informal sector. And if you look at our demographics, if you look at demographics, 90% of the user group that uses railway station is low income group and middle income group. And those people are also dependent on the informal sector that exists on the railway stations. So that human network and that activity pattern needs to be understood and integrated at the ground floor as well as the concourse level plan. I'm sure they, with experts, on board, these things might be taken care of, but this was something I didn't see it in the FBC codes. And if I would suggest that all these people should be integrated within the FBC codes. The other aspect, that was talked about was, again, Arnav sir pointed out, was about homogeneity. Now, the homogeneity is coming because of application of a similar kind of a framework to all the stations across the nation. And also, right now, what we see is, form-based codes leading to an imagery which shows, most of the images with glass and steel being used. So that is also leading. That may also lead to the urban heat island effects within the precincts. So that also needs to be seen. And any station that is ingrained within a precinct should be it's also what Arnav sir said, that we should look the station outside to inside. So basically, getting the city as part of the station and then developing our prototypes. That's another thing that I wanted to point it out. And the community development, it's a good idea, because you have also said that community development is the key focus, and it's a bottoms-up approach. So integrating the community, the neighborhoods, involving them right up front, at this planning stage, would really help in making a projectization of these sites. Because you may find that certain community facilities or social infrastructure that can be built up within the master plan for the railway development can be done right now. As Romy pointed out, that one of the developer now wants to change one of the plot into a hospital. Now that need has to be ascertained today, and which will be quite good if we can do that. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your valuable suggestions. Sir, should we take some questions, sir, MD sir?
Yes, I think we can quickly take some questions, and then I'll try best to summarize a number of issues which have been raised. There are certain points on which we have to take action. There are certain clarifications which need to be given to this large fraternity that is there. So before I do that, definitely we should take few questions from anybody who would...
Sir, there was a suggestion from Adwaita Jalan, if she could unmute and very quickly ask questions. Yeah.
Hello, thank you. Thank you, Adarsh, for that. Actually, I have been working on few form-based code projects and have been recently researching also on it for a few years now. So I have just few pointers. Taking forward Arnav sir's point that when we are looking at the city, when you're trying to intervene, you're looking at how the city marker or the station is going to be a city marker. So it's going to add to the city skyline. So that was one thing which I think is very prominent, and it must be taken because it leaves a effect, long lasting effect, and the generations to come will keep on looking at it. So how it's going to add to that. So that was one thing. Another point which was touched in the document was about the wayfinding features. So it is not about isolated signage boards or the hoardings we are talking about. We need a comprehensive solution to that. Otherwise, there will be clutter, what we see right now. So we had done this project in Edison where we had this form-based code we were doing, and we had this ordinance there, they called it ordinance. So here we can have this card for the signages specifically varying on the type of development. And I do agree to the previous speakers that form-based code is specifically about the types. They are very specific. You move away from the homogeneity which we are trying to create. But I think the local distinctiveness has to be achieved. So one more suggestion is the documentation process is important. And if that can be taken on board, a detailed how you're going to document, I think, the existing city and the fabric, because without that, the response is going to be a half-baked solution, as mentioned by previous speakers. And I think these were, and the implementation is something, if the land belongs to railway, they should actually, they have the option of going for the mandatory or a freestanding approach to have a comprehensive outcome. So that is also part of how you implement. And the last one was the enforcement and code administration, which is very critical to ensure that you have what you are proposing, because enforcement is where we lack, and most of the countries abroad, they have a system in place, a mechanism called the enforcement department. So who make sure that whatever was proposed, discussed through the elaborate process is implemented and taken forward in the ground. So that's it. And thank you so much for giving this opportunity. And I think it's a very good project and a pilot project for all the other form-based codes to do. So I think congratulations to the team. Thank you, Adarsh, for giving this opportunity.
We can take 2 more questions in case if there are any questions, suggestions of anybody.
So there are a lot of questions.
I know there is a huge interest and we have time limitations, so we can stretch with the permission of all a bit, but maybe all of you must be having some other engagement as well. So we can complete whatever questions are there.
Smita Singh, would you want to like to pose the questions?
Yes. I do. Hi, this is Smita. So I've been a real estate consultant for 15 years, even though I'm an urban designer and planner. The challenge which I see, which with some of the aspects here, is that I feel that there is an inclination of commercial optimization, maximization, etc., which is definitely needed because ISRDC needs to produce the revenues that it needs. But I think that has to be optimized rather than maximized. And I think fundamentally the problem, and I'm speaking now with the financial hat, is that when you look it over, your 99-year lease period, typically your IRR will be generated over the first 10 years, 15 years. And anything long term gets sacrificed over the short term sort of IRR focused idea. Now great urban design is equal to great real estate is a fact. It's a universal fact. There's no denying that. So I congratulate that FPC is a step towards creating great urban design, which will definitely support great real estate, great revenue optimization, etc. But our stations are about informality. I mean, one thing which sets our stations aside is its informality, both in terms of the shopkeepers, the small chaiwalas, even the housing, informal housing around the stations. It's the classic affordable housing. How is that incorporated? How do you get all that informality back? If you look at our airports, airports we expect to get in, get out fast. At stations typically are romanticized areas for us, even in memory. We step out of the train after a 2-day, 3-day journey. We look up to the sky, we look at the vendors, all that, it gets lost when you are sort of focused on this commercial development. And that informality needs to be brought back, as I think Vikas said very well. The third aspect that I wanted to talk about was, again, contextual development. I think Arunabha sir said that very well. Contextual development in all aspects, in terms of development mix, in terms of form, character, etc. Now, there has to be that level of flexibility. When you standardize codes across 8,000 odd stations, how do you bring that variation in? So as a sort of suggestion was that you kind of look at urban design schemes at plot level or subplot level as technical bids, as part of the technical bids from developers, invited from developers, so that you can choose the most organic, the most sort of sensitive design, which is not just sort of, based on maximization, so not just the financial bid, but also the overall form and design. So those were my points. Thank you so much, Adarsh.
This is Champaka. I have a brief point to make if there's a minute, please.
Can you please keep your cameras on, because it looks really strange looking at the empty screen.
Yes. I would like to emphasize that the aspect of uncertainty and risks needs to be maintained central even to the context of form-based codes. And this, again, I'm underscoring the link and relationships between contracts and form-based codes. And I completely agree with Ms. Sujata that it's critical to maintain regulations, but also regulatory processes as flexible, because that would allow judicious incremental development to take place, where risk management will then become integral to design as well as management of these public-private partnerships based railway station developments. So that's a limited point, but I think it's a very critical one, that uncertainty and risks, particularly in these long-term contracts, become very critical to the imagination of design. Thank you.
Any more questions?
Adarsh, can I add a point?
Yes, please.
This is Nishant Lal. I'm a faculty at SPA. I think it's a great opportunity for IRSDC to look at policy enablers. And I think the biggest point would be in enlarging the green cover, because we've talked about heat island, and these developments will not work, people who know about it, without increasing green cover. You need to create like micro-urban forests, which will bring down temperature locally. I'll give you one example. When T5 Heathrow was opened, they had to get coolers in all the walkways because it was just too hot. So we have to be cognizant of all the climate change, which was addressed earlier. So somewhere where ISDC could look at all these real aspects evolving now in the policy. Thank you.
Anybody from JJ School of Arts? Because I was from JJ School of Arts. Because the principal was sending me some comments, so I think their team is also there. No. Okay. I think Sujata ji wanted to say something.
Yeah, sir, if I may. Sometimes role play workshops or gaming workshops actually will help in having these kind of workshops where different roles are played, and also then these some of these points will come up in these exercises related to like the community, the slum dwellers, the everyday passenger, maybe some a developer, somebody else. So multi-stakeholder workshops, but sometimes maybe even with role play internally within your organization might also actually help in sorting out some of these issues. Because at the end of the day, I know you mentioned that, Romy also mentioned that you're not trying to do anything, you're following the master plan. But one of the things maybe you will find that in the process of doing station related development, you will actually maybe even improve the master plan, or there may be opportunities to improve the master plan. And I don't think you should limit yourself. Some opportunities arise, you should actually highlight those. And I know somebody mentioned about vehicular pedestrian segregation. I really worry about that, because I know Hong Kong has a lot of footbridges and a lot of people love those, but at the same time don't do them all over the place, because you don't want to sterilize your ground level and make it prone for only cars. Because very quickly, if you don't do it right, you'll have just cars on the ground level and all the pedestrians either going up or down. And that shouldn't be the case. So be mindful of these kind of things which might work in certain situations, but you don't want to have a blanket policy that you want to segregate vehicular and pedestrian flows. And pedestrian flows are important for retail, everything else as well. Public space and air quality. If you have pedestrians walking around, you know your air quality has to be good. Not so important in closed air conditioned cars. Right? So I know we are running out of time, but excellent engagement exercise, and thank you for doing this.
Thank you, Sujata ji. So whatever questions which our delegates could not ask, I would request if they can put in the chat box or in the mail. So you can also mail it to them. So we'll definitely try to ponder over all the comments and suggestions to the extent we can incorporate them. Some broad, just few minutes clarification, etc. I think there was a mention about why are we calling it commercial development. So when we see it from the terminology of the local bylaws, etc., there the commercial development and residential development is from the typology of land use. The Railway Act says railway administration has been empowered by Amendment Act 47 of 2005, developing railway for commercial use. So essentially, when it is saying commercial use or commercial development is essentially for making non-fare blocks revenue, which I think had also mentioned that they have NFR of 50% or something. So essentially, this monetization of land, developing land for commercial use is for the purpose of generating non-fare revenue. And our job is to make money out of air. So yes, while on one hand we have conflicting demand of rationalization of the kind of financial gains which we want to make, but essentially we would be criticized if we do not also at the same time maximize the gains. So whenever we have to see the fair value at which we have given it to a public-private partnership, all the CAGs and all the 6 Cs that we have, CBC and CBI and all those, so they will see whether the market value of land, whatever was reasonable, so at that it has transacted or it is at a lesser rate. But our aim is that with the efforts of the urban design, and I think very, very important point which was made by Mr. Sham was that the primacy of public space and sections for pedestrians. So that is the focus, and that is with that focus only these codes have been designed. In any case, in the station area, these speeds are not going to be high where we need segregation. You need segregation where the speeds permitted are more than 30 kmph. So if the speeds are 30 kmph, so what you need is tabletop crossings, etc., for the pedestrians to cross, so that they can safely cross. So only traffic calming measures are required, and the proper design is required. So that is what is being done as part of our course. There are a lot of issues the city might be having, and all those problems of the city cannot be solved by railways. The railway land in the city is very limited. So we might have all the ideas and we might try to solve all the problems of the city, but definitely railway cannot solve all the problems of the city. So what we are trying to do is that whatever we do in railway land, as Sujata ji also said, the cabinet has also approved that development in railway land should be harmonious with the surrounding development. I am using it in the manner our development should be so good that the development in the surrounding area also copies are, so that it is harmonious with the surrounding development. So harmony can be either way, either we copy or they copy. So we are trying that we become so good that they copy and then it becomes harmonious. So we are going to be the icons of the city, and that is how we are planning. So that is essentially the aim. It is not 8,000 stations on which the same thing is going to be there. It will be, if you take 8,000 stations, 5,000 of them, they are halt stations. So they are the kind of development, etc. If at all it is to be done, it will be entirely different to what extent it is required or not. Even if you see globally, all stations are not redeveloped. So it will be the stations which are in tier 1, tier 2, or maybe sometimes in tier 3 cities only, which will be developed. And these codes are broad guidelines, they are not rigid. So definitely we are taking into account the comment suggestions which have been given, and we'll try to incorporate them to the extent possible. Considering the time paucity, so I will now hand over to Mr. Arke.
Thank you very much, sir. Now I think it's time to say a vote of thanks. So I'll invite Mr. P.S. Uttarwar to say a vote of thanks.
Thank you very much. And I think so thank you is not enough, but we are grateful for such a Mahakumbh of thinkers, designers, philosophers, and everything. And it will definitely help us to create new codes. And thank you very much for the endorsement also. So on behalf of Indian Railway Station Development Corporation, I would like to thank everyone for taking out time, joining today's session. We are grateful to Mr. Shyam Khandekar, Dr. Gowda, and Fabrice Morinon for their insightful presentations. Especially, it was a lot of learning for us from these things, and that will be make our course very practical. And then now, whatever the feedback or suggestions we have received from the panelists, Mr. Chofla, Mr. Dasgupta, Ms. Shastri, Ms. Raghupati, Mr. Kanojia, and Mr. Mistry. We are also thankful to the extended community of urban designers and others who have joined today's focus group discussion on form-based codes format being adopted by RSDC. I would like to also thank all those who have sent feedback today or in the past, and we will revert back to them with our responses. And coming to the IRSDC, I think the huge thanks goes to Mr. Sanjeev Kumar Lohia, MD and CEO of IRSDC, whose background of urban transport in the ministry and his passion for urban transport and making the mission. This is almost a mission like for us and IRSDC. So thank you very much for conceiving this idea and bringing all national and international experts to the one forum. And thanks very much to the R.K. Singh Saab, Director Project and Planning, who is mostly Sutradhar for all these sessions and backbone of the whole program. Then Mr. Vikvek Bhushan Sood, who has been heading planning vertical of IRSDC for his excellent presentation. And of course, Romi Roy, her enthusiasm keeps us pushing, moving, and her interest in TOD and expertise also helps us. Then there is other supporting officers also. Deep Sharma ji, Anil Kumar, Chief General Manager, who is giving IT support. And then our foot soldiers, Utkarsh, Rishabh, Nitish, Akash Kumar Das, and Bilal, etc. So thankful to all and everybody. And again, once from bottom of our hearts, we thank you all for your very, very useful contribution and endorsing our form-based course. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much.